Whether you're looking for the truth, wanting to hear the answers to the big questions of life, or whether you just want to feel more self-sovereignty, this is the Andi Steele Podcast. Welcome to the Andi Steele Podcast. Today I speak with DK Pike, author, podcast producer, and personal trainer. This is the Andi Steele Podcast. Action.
All right, cool.
Mate,
Thanks,
welcome to the podcast.
I know, honestly, I'm really...
Mate, it's I can say, I'm going to touch you.
Yeah,
I'm going to touch you.
I'm really excited because this has been a year in the making, more than a year.
It's I sent you an Instagram thing earlier on because we jousted with it, and here, cheers. Here's to
the book, to Andi Steele.
Cast Iron Coffee Roasters.
Yeah. Say that again.
Cast Iron Coffee Roasters. They're a place in Chichester that my friend recommended, and
not bad, strong.
This is, I can't remember the name of it. Whoops, isn't very good. But this is, something I'm trying to get used to. It's very floral. I'm like into chocolate and sweet coffee, but this is kind of your afternoon cup for me. It's like, wake up.
I can practically taste the cat shit. That's when you know it's a good bean. That's when you know it's a good bean,
It's
man.
crazy. I'm gonna check down here because I've got some things I want to cover with you. Like you said, it's been a year. We're finally here. It was October
2020.
Yeah, 2020, I can't remember, like late October when we were practicing the setup and I was mooching about going right. And then you were going to be my first guest, and then we won't call it what it is, we'll just leave that thing that happened in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then
things happened, and here we are now.
Well, I think I'd got everything ready. That happened, and I realised I wasn't probably ready. Then I took another kind of dive. I'm like, no, it's going back down. And then, obviously, what happened? Obviously, I interviewed Jeff. You were supposed to be number one. Jeff ended up being podcast number one. And then you went off on a journey. What happened?
Started my own podcast. Got my book.
What's your podcast called?
Save-Room Podcast.
Save-Room, S-A-V-E.
Yeah, so it's a Resident Evil reference. So the third lockdown happens. I got an Xbox for Christmas. Thank you to my mother. Very kind gift from her.
Just make sure you do keep that. Literally, you can be quite close to it.
Oh yeah, cool. No, that's all right. I was worried about pop, but that's cool, man. Yeah, I got an Xbox for Christmas 2020, and got into contact with an old friend I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Sean and we've been friends for about 12 years, 15 years now. Actually, we met at school, and our chemistry just made the thing work. And because we had nothing to lose by this point, you got to bear in mind we had nothing to lose. I was on my ass. We weren't working. It was January.
Well, yeah. You're working at the gym, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously because no one was allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And then what were you going to do?
Yeah. So we did a podcast using shitty Skype, right? 23 frames per second, which is gone.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I don't know what I've set this at.
Probably anyway. 30 standard.
Probably.
But one thing led to another. Yeah, it's going good. But the book happened too. Got that finished. Yeah.
So you went through. So that's what's been going on. What I mean, there's some other questions. I've got quite a few questions. Let me just have a quick flick. I've not done my homework mate, it's been so rushed to get to... I was like...
Improvisation's my specialty,
The outcome is just to get here and be like, oh, right, thank God I'm here. We can just have a chat. This is like... I've been full on. If I could have filmed the effort just to get this, you'd have been like, fucking hell, Andy. What's going on? So, yeah, there's a few questions here. We'll cover them in a minute as we go, but there's definitely things I want to cover. One of the things is with this podcast is the only people I want on are people I'm interested in, they're my friends. And there's kind of three categories. If the truth, so that's like whatever the fuck that means.
Objective truth. What kind of truth?
Exactly.
Your truth.
The truth, whatever that is. The big questions of life. Like why are we here? No doubt we'll end up down that rabbit hole. And self-sovereignty. Ownership over yourself, and those are the topics at some point we'll make sure we cover. I've got some specific questions about the book. I mean, maybe we start, do you want to talk about the book?
Absolutely.
I think where's like, let's just start from the beginning. So for people at home that don't know who you are, maybe like, who are you, what do you do, and then maybe go to like the start of what What started the journey of Fauville?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where as a child I've always had a crazy imagination. You know, I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. They were what you call my formative years, playing video games. And I've said on my own podcast in the past, we didn't have like the MCU, we didn't have these cinematic universes. It was one.
What's the MCU?
Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, all the...
Oh, right, sorry, yeah,
right.
Nice.
So just to give you a broad reference, you know, back in the day, like you got a film, you got Blade, or you got whatever, and that was it. It was one and done. Like if you didn't get a sequel, tough shit, right?
Right.
So it kind of left a lot in the imagination to be like, is that all good?
What did happen?
I was just looking at the computer, I saw it flash. You good?
Yeah, I presume that's still recording.
Yeah, so back in those days, you know what I mean, things, video games and media were so, even like with BBC or ITV series, like you get 2 episodes and then you fucking wouldn't hear a thing for 2 years. It's just, that's how it was. There wasn't that same
Let me just double
consumption.
Check. Otherwise,
This is that's the power of editing, my friend.
Yeah. I've been talking a lot already. Yeah, we're still rolling. I just wondered.
Like I said, part of the editing. I'll start back.
No, we can leave that in.
But basically what I'm trying to say is that as a kid, you know, I play certain video games, and we're not talking like the video games of today. Very crude, 3-dimensional simulations, you know, where you kind of had to fill in the gaps with your own imagination. And I'd be at school, at primary school, I'd be writing stories, I'd be writing things based on things I'd watched, movies, sci-fi, you know, books I'd read in the library. And I'd basically just, as a kid, you know, you just plagiarize because you just write what you see. You reflect your own environment.
How can they I like that when it's like the whole N word. Like, how can it be plagiarizing if all you've seen is that? I mean, I get what plagiarism is, right? But it's like, you didn't force me, but I've listened to your album for over 3,000 times. And I have to use the N word or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've read your book. I've been, you know, you've made this $1 billion Star Wars film, for instance, and you've gone onto this child's mind.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, you know, it's like, you can't use that. And it's like, but it's inspiring. You know, obviously it's inspiring.
So yeah, what happens is as you get older, you start to kind of grasp your ways of expressing yourself, right? So I always knew from a young age with writing. I just love putting pen to paper. Even to this day, if I've got nothing to write, I still love just writing things. And when I was 14 years old, I got published my short story got published.
No way.
So it was called Infection. Infection, right. So it was inspired by a video game that had just come out for the Xbox 360.
Can people get hold of that? Is that available for people to read?
I'm not very proud of it, to be honest, mate. You know what I mean?
All right, okay. It's like,
not that I'm not proud of it, but you know, I'm 14 years of age. You know what I mean? What do you expect?
I don't know.
It's not fucking not D.H. Lawrence, is it?
I don't know. Some people.
All right, I'll tell you the backstory of this little short story, right? Because to me it meant nothing to me, but what I was taken aback by was the response by my teacher and those around me. Right? Okay. They were the ones that were like praising me, and to me it was just like breathing. All right, so what happened was I played this video game, and in this video game it was like Xbox 360 Live, right? So it was the first time I'd ever experienced online gaming, and there was this one game called Infection, and the idea of the game is, right, let's say there's 32 people in the game, 4 of those people are infected.
Right, okay, so it's literally what it says, infection.
They're skeletons, right? Now, you can kill them, but they'll keep respawning, all right, until the time is over. If they kill you, you're one of the infected.
And then...
So either you survive long enough,
right,
or you're all infected, right? So the short story was inspired by the tension I felt being the last player alive in that map. Just trying to run out that time, and there's 20 of them closing in around me. And I've just got like very little health. So I wrote this short story called Infection. And it was about a man inside a sort of boiler room, and you can hear screams on the other side of the door, like these zombies, these monsters trying to get into him. And he's next to him is like a corpse, and there's a gun in the corpse's hand, and it's got 1 bullet in it. And he picks it up, and all through the story, it's just his own internal monologue of what he's going to do and how this happened. And then the story ends, and it's only 250 words, but the story ends with them breaking through the door, and it just goes bang, and you don't know if he shot himself or shot it down.
Oh, right.
Now, at 14 years of age, that's, you know...
My English teacher was quite impressed. I'm going to say, like, make that, you know, obviously your stuff's your stuff, and it's... But
the point is, that all came from my experiences playing this silly video game. And I was able to articulate that and repurpose it in a way that would become an original piece, which was just 250 words. So anyway, it get published.
So that's like the origins. You were 14.
14 years of age, right? And my English teacher entered it into what's called the Young Writers Award in 2006.
And you're not from Weymouth?
No, I'm from Corby in Northamptonshire. Yeah,
obviously
Scotland.
Yeah,
Scotland.
So it's Corby in Scotland. I don't know where exactly.
So Corby is in the Midlands, right? It's in the East Midlands. So the story of Corby.
Where's that close to? I'm not.
It's 90 miles north of London, I'd say. Right. Because south of Corby, you've got Bedford and Luton.
Okay, I can see those. Yeah. So where's the Scottish thing come from?
So during the Second World War, a lot of Scottish people moved down to Corby for the steelworks. There's a lot of jobs going, so that's what happened, and they never left.
Right.
So I'm sort of that second generation Scotsman, and my dad moved down to Corby in 1989. Met my mother. They got married and had me, and
and the rest is history.
But look, Corby's not a very. It's quite an impoverished town. Right. But it's your typical.
Is there still like that kind of work going on there, or is
it's a lot? It's what you call a distribution hub, right? Because it's in the middle of England, so lorries and deliveries they can go north, south, east, and west, right? So it's a distribution hub. So up until recently, you had Weetabix factory there. You had you had RS Component. All the factories are there. All the industrial stuff is in that town. So naturally, you'll get a lot of Eastern Europeans coming for work. So there's quite the melting pot. But the point. Despite the impoverished town, one of the unique aspects of living in that town was that it inherited that Scottish storytelling kind of ability.
Is that a thing for Scottish people to?
I think so, because
I know lots of stories like
it's like that
Templar moved to Scotland.
It's that gallows humour. That humour amongst veterans or soldiers or sailors, whatever you want to call it. Right? It's very irreverent. If that's a good word to use, and. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, so I'd be like any kid. I'd be going to the pub with my parents and all that, and you just hear these stories, constantly. Stories being told, even like now.
What's like a story? Yeah, go on. You were going to say.
I'm just surrounded by storytellers, and I found that, I wasn't the best storyteller as a teenager. I lacked confidence. I wasn't really able to articulate. I wasn't.
Maybe you needed more not Guinness. Is it Guinness? No, that's Irish, isn't it? Maybe you needed more. What is it?
Bugfast.
People drank.
Well, Iron Brew and fucking whatever.
What was maybe you needed more
Bugfast.
What's that?
It's like
just beer.
It's basically like bottom of the barrel in terms of quality.
Oh, it's
the same way the Aussies was how the Australians feel towards red tail. Yellowtail. Sorry.
So is that a lager or a beer or something?
Yellowtail is a wine, red wine.
Oh, right. So Bugfast.
They call it gut rot. I think they call it gut rot because all the dyes and
I don't want to know.
Nah. But the thing is, right. So I remember being at school, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I'd be at school in the playgrounds in senior school. And you'd always know who was the most gregarious, who was the most confident in themselves to tell stories. And they'd have 6 or 7 people creased over laughing. And deep down inside, I was like, I wish I could hold people's attention the way that I had. But it wasn't something I had developed until my adulthood. Now I'm now able to hold people's attentions and tell them things without boring them, because it's just something you practice. You kind of pick up on the signs, you pick up on the, the cues and whatnot. But anyway, so
you're 14, you're in Corby, you're learning, you've picked up the stuff, you've been put forward for this
Young Writers Award.
And then how do you go? Whistle stop. How do you go from there to writing your first book? Because you can go online, fucking hell. It's like, write your first book. And, it's like as soon as you look at anything like that or even speak about it, all of a sudden, every advert is like, write a book in 3 minutes or something like that. So how do you go from being the Writers Award to writing Fauville?
Well, I'd had other stories I'd come up with in my head, Yeah,
because when we met, maybe we could... Sorry.
We can talk about this other thing.
I was going to say, when we met, when did we meet?
In the early summer of 2013.
Is it really that long?
That's the autistic memory for you, mate.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the whole Asperger's.
We'll get into that later, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about
that's
that.
That's a subject in itself. That's a whole fucking can of worms, that is.
What's it called now? It's autistic
Asperger's.
Asperger. It's kind of ruining my whole burger game. Every time I have a burger, I'm like, nah, I've got Asperger's. So when we met, I remember you saying to me about I think you were interested in writing a book, and you were really into your parkour at the time, and that's kind of how we met, wasn't it? I remember meeting you there. You were sat there in the gym that I used to work at, then you were working out at the time, and I think I come to cover a class or something.
You just fucking popped up, man. You're like, you're just like Beetlejuice.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Andy Steele.
all their heads turned. Andy Steele's back. We thought you were dead.
Yeah, he's back from the dead.
But yeah, no, you showed up and you just fucking like the second coming of Jesus Christ, mate. The sun was behind your head.
I think it was. It might have been the right time of day. It does shine through that window.
Well, we got to go back onto that whole Ubermensch thing, but we'll get into that later. Yeah. But yeah, so you show up and I introduced you to parkour because that was a very important part of my life between the ages of 15 and 21.
Because I wanted to do, there's a range of backflip. Yeah, was that what it was? I remember going, I really just want to be able to stand there and do it. Yeah, and then that was like, no way, parkour. And I think there was, I don't know what, we just hit it off. And I was like, no way. And then
conversation was easy. It was never a debate. It was always open-ended. And I think most like-minded people who engage in open discussion are going to want to continue that because, we're not overly egocentric. Like, we want to be wrong. We want to be challenged.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, thank God.
In order to validate your values and your opinions, sometimes it helps to have a like-minded person like yourself challenge those values and put them back in because it forces me to have to recoup. And
it can get lonely, I think. Yeah, someone said to me about it can get really lonely. You
can become a slave to your own solitude, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're the only person rolling like that in that way of thought processes, I was looking at doing the whole, I think I told you about the whole university lecturer thing. And I thought, I want to do a PhD. I want to go, get an academic qualification. And this is partly to do with this, actually. It's like, well, in the meantime, why don't you find people that do what you want to do and interview them, and find out. Because there's nothing worse than getting 4 or 5 years down the line and go, fucking no, I didn't see this coming. I've done all the research and all this stuff. But this person was saying about, Andy, you don't really think like everybody else. And you remind me of my husband, she said. And she said, and I said, I didn't know if that was a good thing, by the way. And it wasn't a sexual relationship. She was like a mentor kind of person. And she'd lectured at uni. And I always remember her saying, like, when you go to a university town or somewhere like that, a university, you'll be surrounded by more like-minded people because I imagine you get really lonely. And this reminds me of what you said. It's like there's not many people that are thinking on that waveform on a daily basis, just as in on a entry level. Weather's nice, yeah, fuck the shit about the weather, tell me about the meaning of life. So yeah, hey, no way. Do you know what I mean? And it gets, that kind of desire to think and question things and be challenged isn't everybody's cup of tea, especially in Weymouth.
It's the true foundation of a genuine friendship. Like the friendship I have with you and the friendship I have with my girlfriend. She doesn't just kiss my ass for the sake of it. Like she will challenge me. And it forces me, like I said, to kind of regroup and kind of, it fires off certain brain cells that I might have not really kind of entertained in a while. So I'm forced to have to broaden my thought track and be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one little point. And you bring it into the point that you're trying to make and it helps, it stimulates you, it keeps you on your toes. And that's important because otherwise you become complacent and you become stagnant.
Just people being engaged or engaging and being involved in a conversation rather than... like the whole saying goes, just waiting to speak or fucking, just go in places mentally with people, like on a trip, literally. So where are we?
So that short story happened when I was 14 and I'd like watch films and whatnot and I'd get inspirations from this, that and the other. But none of it would really, I never had the work ethic. I'd just scribble things down on paper and I'd write blogs, I'd write diaries. So I was always writing. But it wasn't really till... because when I was doing parkour, I was in and out of writing, but it was very sporadic. And it wasn't really till I was about 19 years of age, actually. Let me take you right back to the beginning, right? I'm 17 years old, and I'm in Weymouth, because I moved here when I was 16. And I took it upon myself, I took the incentive to go out to the public library and read some stuff. And I thought, right, let's go to the sci-fi department, because that's what I want to read, right? Because, I could already read, and I'd read things growing up, read Beano, Dandy Comics, a Viz magazine, for fuck's sake, Very liberal parents. I was always reading, but to really sit down and read a book, and I see this artwork. It caught my eye, and they say you should never judge a book by its cover, but I did, right?
Turns out I did.
And it was by the same guy that done this cover, right? Stéphane Martinier. He's a Frenchman, and beautiful artist. And he'd done the artwork for a trilogy known as the Jump 225 trilogy by an author I always get his name wrong, but it's David Louis Edelman. He's an American sci-fi author.
So he did the artwork for him?
For him on his behalf of this author,
for his books.
This book had come out in 2006. This was 2010, right? So
what was the book?
it was actually part 2 of a trilogy that I saw.
Right.
It was like green. It was beautiful. Right, Stefan Martini. Like I said, people who are seeing this right now, I mean, look at how beautiful that artwork is. Imagine that, but just something else. You know what I mean? This man's consistently amazing with his work. And I went on Amazon when I got home and I realised, that's part 2. So let's go get part 1 and go on Amazon. It's called Infoquake.
Right.
Like the purple neon lights, it just really enticed me. And I pick it up and I loved it the first time when I first read it.
What's that film? It kind of reminds me of with A New Life Awaits You on the
That's Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, that's it. Yeah, it's kind of got that. I mean, that like you say, the futuristic space, kind of like what is...
The bright lights just attracted me. And that was the beginning. Now, I'm going to just be honest and say that Infoquake isn't my cup of tea anymore. It's not a good book, in all honesty.
We can leave that there.
Right there. So, I then took it a bit further. I started watching Blade Runner. Funny you mentioned that.
Right, okay. No way.
Now, the first time I watched it at 17 years of age, I was like, I don't get it. Because a year or 2 before the re-release had happened, the what they call the uncut version, not the uncut version, but like the final cut.
Right.
The final cut of Blade Runner came out 25 years after its release, and it's the definitive version.
It's like, we've decided this is...
Yeah, Ridley Scott decided this is it. This is absolutely it. All the little broken bits here and there.
Right, we fixed everything. Is that what it means? Because I always think, fucking hell, what do they mean? Uncut, final cut? Yeah. And it's like, well...
This was the definitive version.
Like Total Recall recently had I think it's a final cut, I think. Something came up
Didn't
and I
know
thought, I want to watch it. And
I want to check that out. But it's perfect as it was.
With Arnold Schwarzenegger in it.
But anyway, so I watched it the first time and I didn't understand it because the way I was seeing it, because I was doing college, right? I was doing media studies and radio in my first year of college before I went on to go and do sports. But in the lobby, whatever they want to call it, the computer room, I was seeing Blade Runner posters everywhere because it had only just come out, the final cut.
Oh, right.
I'm like, this must be good.
Is that at the college here in Weymouth?
Pardon?
Is that the Weymouth College?
Yeah, Weymouth College, yeah. The LG, I think they call it. Anyway, it's like the learning hub. So I get around to watching the film and I'm like, I don't get the hoo-ha because my brain hadn't quite come online to the visual spectacle that this film was, the substance of it, what was being pushed forward. I was like expecting it to be some sort of action.
Yeah, it was a bit odd. I remember watching it. It was quite young. It was dark.
6 months later, a year later, I sit down and watch it again. And it's that speech right at the end with Rutger Hauer talking about, tears.
Hauer, that's the guy, the blonde head.
Yeah. The Dutch actor.
Yeah.
And he does that speech about tears and rain.
Right.
And my brain just kind of, when a brain cell just fired off. I thought that was quite profound. Rewound that scene and listened to it again. And it's a beautiful speech. And then every time I kept going back to Blade Runner, every couple of months, I pick up new things that really were just beautiful. I was starting to, that part of my brain was developing.
It's funny, isn't it? I forget who said about this. Who was it? This guy reads the same book. I forget who it was. It's like, it's someone everybody knows. Like in that kind of spiritual way. Anyway, it will come to me in a minute. He goes like, I read the same book back to back. And he's like, because every time I come back round to read it again, the learning that I've applied from it the first time, I've changed, I've got something new, and I watch it again and I see it in a different view. And then the paradox is I can hear, I think it's Tony Robbins or someone going, how many of you out there like to watch the same film and watch it over again and again? He's like, and it's like, get a fucking life. It's like, you Sir Fox. So why? Because he's trying to make out the need for certainty and shit. But at the same time, that other paradox of and he had his name then.
Sorry, William Shatner, didn't he show up at like a Star Trek convention? He just went, get a fucking life and left.
Well, he went to space. Did you see that documentary about him recently? Yeah, it's pretty interesting. He's an interesting chap. And I didn't realise he was 90 something.
Oh, man, that old adrenochrome, isn't it? No, I'm joking. I don't know. Allegedly. Allegedly.
That kind of chrome.
Yeah. So, I literally have no idea.
Runner, you're in college.
Anyway, so I'm 19 years of age. Let's fast forward. So I'm 19 years of age, right? And I'm watching Blade Runner for like the 4th, 5th time, right? It was like a 4 monthly thing, right?
What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's lovely. Honestly, it's lovely. No bullshit.
It's
lovely.
Yeah, because I'm like,
I know
I sent the shit back.
I know you're
No, sorry, I didn't send it back. Sorry. I phoned him up and said, I'm so sorry, I've just bought a kilo of this. And this is going to be my main thing.
The feds are snooping around my house.
Yeah. And they're like, I brought a fucking kilo of this. And I'm so sorry, but it tastes like absolute ass. And they're like, oh, look, we get it. It's cool. It's Marmite. It's one of our best sellers. It's also one of our hated products.
Honestly, it's decent.
Yeah, I wondered. Because today, I've been a while since I had it last. And I'm like, right, if I can just wean, it's one of those things, weaning into fucking a different taste. It's like olives. I don't know if you were.
I love olives.
But you always love olives?
No, not until I was an adult.
Right, because same here. So it's one of those things. I'm like, I just need to maybe I need to grow up with this shit. But now I'm drinking it now. I'm like, oh, you know what? I can see how it works. But initially, I'm like, fuck that. Like with olives or something like that, it's one of those things you go, fucking hell. Anyway.
Yeah, so 4/5 time. I'm 19, right? And I'm watching Blade Runner, and it gets to the end credits and it says, based on the novel by Philip K. Dick.
Mate,
why is that funny?
Someone said Dick the other day. They were like, what was it, this film? Hey, Dick. And it's like the whole American...
You'll find it risible when I say the name Dickus. He had a wife, you know. Yeah, so Philip K. Dick, he's an American author, sci-fi author. He died like literally about...
It's short for Richard, isn't it? You know what I mean? Usually, is that right?
Philip Kindred Dick, I don't know. That's his last name.
Oh, no, sorry. This is his surname.
Anyway, but it is short for Richard, yeah. But so he was
Richard III.
He died basically just before Blade Runner came out, so he became famous after he died, right? So
Thank God you're here, motherfuckers. I'm with the book and everything's going on.
Exactly. But he wrote like 50 novels before he died. The guy was poor. But I'll get to Philip K. Dick in a bit, right? So because it's quite an interesting story, the man himself. So this is, and I've literally read one book by this point as an adult, which was Infilquake. Right. So I'm like, right, Philip K. Dick, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. That's the name of the novel.
Android's Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah, and I thought, right, I'm going to order it. So I go on Amazon, boom, 19 years of age, and I read it, and I'm mesmerised by this book.
Just the title itself forces me into those perspectives.
But that was the beginning. That was the beginning of me reading, like...
So make sure they...
No, that's sound.
It's you, like, just look over and it's like the bottom.
Yeah, no, that's sound. That's sound.
Right, it won't be long out, will it?
But that was it. That's when I started reading properly as an adult.
So that started the reader. How many books did you kind of... Because remember when I said I read yours? So I've read your book. You kindly sent it to me. I'm grateful. And also grateful for the challenge. Because I'm a science dude. I just read factual rubbish. I'm boring.
It's not a problem, though.
But I think I've read a book called First and 10 when I was a kid. And it was about American football. And I was like, yeah, I had American football on the cover. And I read it and I'm like, this is fucking non-fiction. This is a fucking storybook. I'm like, what the fuck? Where's the stats? Where's the... Or whatever, you know what I mean? Where's the figures? And I thought, fuck this, I'm going to read it. Maybe a similar age, maybe I was around 10 or something. But I don't usually read like books like that. All the books I have, I mean, they're just not like that. Maybe there's parables and short stories, but they're usually intertwined with, you know what I mean, action to do, sciencey, numbers, whatever else it is, to give example. So this was, for me, reading Fauville was like, fucking hell. I want to do it. I want to do it because, one, it's a challenge, I want to complete it. And I think you said to me, you'll be all right. You read it in, what was it like? What was he said? 5 hours?
53,000 words, so you get through it in less than 5 days.
Yeah, and I'm like, how the fuck does he not do that equation? Because it suggests that someone who reads and knows how long roughly it takes. I'm reading it and I'm like, I'm trying to cram read this motherfucker.
I'm not a fast reader myself, so I'll usually get through about 50 pages in an hour. Right? So
does that depend on font?
Absolutely. But your average book is about 225 to 250 words per page.
See, it's me saying I like facts and figures, and as soon as you start talking facts and figures, I'm like, what is he talking about?
I put it this way: on average, most 12 double space font, blah blah blah, whatever, is 1,000 words is 4 pages. All right, just for argument's sake, it's not always going to be the way, but it's just an easy estimation to make.
Yeah. So you can give yourself a rough idea of. I mean, what about audio? I mean, we spoke before. I said to you, you're going to do an audio.
Yeah, so
version.
audio. So like an audio book,
so you can kind of chuck it on in the background and rock and roll. But I mean, my point is that when I read it and got to the end of it, it was like, oh man. I was like, I don't know if I can. I still don't know if I'm. I mean, I like it. It's great. It's. I don't know. I haven't really given my feedback on it totally yet. But it's, I'm kind of glad I got through it. Because for me, it was a challenge. One, squeezing it in because we set a time and a date. And then I'm like, fucking hell, this is not the kind of reading I do. But it was cool. It kind of, I like the idea that, I finally got the idea, I think it was you said to me, have you read the book Fight Club? Because so the movie gives you the images and everything, it tells you like all the visual stuff. Now, for me, it would be interesting to see how it's portrayed. Like, for instance, if this was made into a movie. So I'm interested to read the book now. So it kind of spurred something in me to read.
Fight Club's is the rare occasion where the actual film is better than the book. The book's good, Don't get me wrong. The book, and it's very easy to read. It's very easy to get along with. But it's one of those rare scenarios where, in my opinion, the film is superior.
Do you want some water?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, though.
I'm going to grab some.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to drink out of the bottle if you don't worry. You sure?
I'm good.
So,
this is you're doing a dissolve edit right here?
No, we'll just keep going. Let's keep it live. Yeah, we'll do that. So.
Yeah, so we talk about Fight Club, right? I mean, there's a few films that are better than the book. Limitless.
Right.
The book's called The Dark Fields. And I actually found the film to be better, being honest. Right, so Philip, Androids is what gets me going, right? It gets me into reading as an adult. Cheers. Gets me reading as an adult for leisure. Philip K. Dick leads to one thing, right? So I'm reading Androids. I'm like, great. And I start reading another one called Neuromancer. It came out in the 80s. It's all about it's basically one of the first books in its genre, which was cyberpunk. Cyberpunk covers dystopian societies. You know, private corporations are sort of the overseers of society.
Yeah, because we spoke a lot about I remember we met briefly, and you started talking to me about like those
cyberpunk. We'll put it this way, right?
Of society. That's what I mean. We're not go off on that tangent, really.
If you look at like sci-fi films from the 60s and 70s, everything is pristine. Like look at Logan's Run, for example. It's all white, isn't it?
Got no idea what Logan's Run is.
Oh, don't worry about it. Well, just think of any sci-fi film from the 60s or 70s. Everything's pristine, and it's just
right. Got you. Yeah.
It's glorified.
Yeah,
it's like, the future's gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But then you get to like the 1980s or the late 70s, early 80s, right? And you got Ronald Reagan's in power.
Right,
Maggie
so
Thatcher's
like this
in power.
Dirty.
Suddenly the future is no longer bright and something to look forward to. Now it's bleak.
It's like gutter.
Dirty.
Yeah.
And there's a massive divide. Austerity is like beyond, right? And that's
like where we're headed in a minute.
Yeah. Now I'm not saying that cyberpunk started in the 80s. It started way before, but it started becoming part of the culture. This cyberpunk subgenre, and Neuromancer was one of the big ones, and Blade Runner was another example of cyberpunk. You're not seeing a bright utopian future. You're seeing a very dirty, dingy, wet future.
Well, I was going to. You know what? It's good. I'm glad you said that, because it does seem to be raining, like in Blade Runner or some other films. There's always this dirty damp. It's not,
and that was quite unusual for that time. That was quite an unusual presentation.
So that was like a change of the norm, like you say, coming from this pristine shit, and all of a sudden, So then what?
So I'm reading Neuromancer, and it took me a long time to read that book because it is all over the place. But it's people praise it because it's the first of its genre. So they will refer to that as the founder of cyberpunk.
Really?
Yeah, because the guy watched Blade Runner in the cinema when he was writing the book, and he went, "Oh fuck, I've got to rewrite all this again." Apparently that's what he said. William Gibson's his name. And then that led on to dystopian fiction. George Orwell, 1984. Right. I tried reading Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, didn't get through it because it's paedophilia nonsense.
Really?
A little bit.
Is it in what way? I've heard of.
Okay, here we go.
Right,
so
Brave New World.
Yeah, Brave New World. This is based on the 80 pages that I read of it. Right, this is what I get the idea of. It's all about in the far future where eugenics is the norm, right? And there's no longer that sort of nuclear family, because this was written back in This was published in 1932.
Eugenics. I mean, explain for people. I mean, some people will hear this and go, "What the fuck is eugenics?"
Eugenics is kind of like scientific method being used. I don't know the textbook definition for it, but genetic engineering, like you can basically, instead of having children through the natural method, you could done in a laboratory, and you can decide what colour eyes they have.
Didn't this happen in some states where they were sterilising families? So I think, wasn't it, if 2 out of 3, if two members of your family, your gene pool, were in trouble with the police, they sterilised everybody and stopped that. I think that was like legal in some states. Or something.
I don't know.
And then I think our dear friend Adolf, who loved children, he really did. He loved children. He was a great man. He really was. You can imagine Trump, like Oh, that'll be the front door. It's just probably I don't know. So eugenics.
Sorry, I'm just thinking that I thought that was a sketch. This is like, it's a giveaway time.
Yeah, it's a giveaway time. Ding dong. Okay, it's
forward laughs Andy Steele. for 10% off your next coffee order.
You can imagine it, can't it? That's got to be what's my mates at the barbers like going, oh yeah, have you seen this NYC something? Oh, what is it? I've had my phone out. I don't want to give them any more. Basically, like they go out in the streets, New York, NYC something, and it's like bing bong or whatever. They do this kind of thing, and it's like their thing where ding dong, and it's like that could be the entrance.
It reminds me of the web series Getting Dug with High when it goes 420 somewhere. When the alarm goes off, like, right, it's time to smoke up, boys. 420 somewhere. It's 420 somewhere. And
that's going to be the intro to the adverts from this point on. We're like, ding dong, who's out of the door?
Brought to you by Ring.
Brought to you by Ring.
And we've got to talk about that because that's in the story. There's a little satire short piece in there.
Let's talk about that now.
All right, so before we get there, so I'm reading all these dystopian fictions and all that. Next thing you know, I'm just becoming addicted, right, to reading, and I'm reading more and more and more, and then I come across Stephen King, and that takes me in one direction, and I come across Alfred Bester, and
what does Alfred do?
Alfred Bester, he's a sci-fi writer, but he was one of those. He did like 2 or 3 books that became famous, and the rest was not known at all. He was known for he was a short story writer, very good short story writer, and he died back in the 80s. You know, I read a lot of people that are already dead, but you have this sci-fi publication called Galanzas, I think it's called, and they sort of like get all the best. They republish all the best stuff from back in the day.
Right.
So I went through their collection.
Bring it back to life.
Arthur C. Clarke, Alfred Bester.
I've heard of Arthur C. Clarke. You told me about.
Yeah. So back in the sci-fi days, we're talking like the 1950s. There was the big 3: Arthur C. Clarke, who was more famously known for Space Odyssey.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
You had Richard Heinlein, and he was more famous for Starship Troopers. Right, that was a book before it became a movie,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
And then there was Isaac Asimov, which was a Foundation series, and iRobot, and we're talking iRobot. We're talking.
So that was iRobot before so that was out.
Yeah,
before.
so they were
I never knew that.
They were the big 3.
One with Will Smith, where he does that.
Exactly.
Is that it?
That's based on Isaac Asimov's work and Bicentennial Man.
And when was that? No way. When was that stuff out? I mean, how old is that from its originality?
Back in the 50s.
Really?
So basically, back in those days, back in the 40s and 50s, there were very few sci-fi authors that did that as their full-time income. But they were the big 3. They were the ones that actually made a living off of that. Right. Philip K. Dick was one of those that didn't. You know what I mean? He sort of lived. He was part of that pulpy era where they were getting paid a penny a word.
God.
And they get, if they're lucky, they get published in a magazine or something like that.
It's bizarre how things kind of change with regards to being paid for value added, and
exactly. So I went through that whole back catalogue of science fiction masterworks, but then I started to branch out into more sort of because sci-fi authors from that era do have their pros and cons. So in order to branch out, you got to expand. And I started reading stuff like Elmore Leonard. Elmore Leonard's more famous for Get Shorty, which became a John Travolta movie.
Right, okay.
Jackie Brown, a Quentin Tarantino movie, which is based on the book Rum Punch. It's one of my favourite Elmore Leonard.
I never knew that. So it's like funny how when it's like music. It seems that I come across something again the other day, and I thought, oh my god, that's that track. I'm like, motherfucker, I never. I'm like, that's where they got it from. I thought that was an original. They come up with it, but you get those samples and.
Well, there was a man that I met when I was 21, and this was towards the tail end of my parkour career. This is when I kind of decided, because with parkour it was weird, the amount of broken bones, the amount of injuries. Yeah. I kept coming back at it, but one day I just get to the top of this wall, and I just decided there, and then I was done with it.
Really?
It was like a peaceful divorce. It was like
it's like I love you.
Yeah, because
but not anymore.
I had some bad shoes 6 months prior, which really cut up the backs of my heels.
Right.
And it was December anyway. So I was forced to just kind of take a month out. So I decided to go to the library and all that.
Not nice to be in the cold outside, I suppose.
Exactly. And I really enjoyed that month off, reading books and just doing nothing. So that was the beginning of the end. And then 6 months later, I finally came to that decision. I'm done with this.
Really?
And that's when I decided to start reading more. And I meet this man named Anthony. We meet up in Starbucks, and he says to me, you got to check out Stephen King's memoir on writing. And I read it, and it changed my life.
You've said this before, because I said to you about what do people, if you want to write more or whatever it was, you recommended that to me.
Big time. And I got into some of his books, and he even used Elmore Leonard as a reference in his memoir, because Elmore Leonard is praised for his dialogue writing. His dialogue is absolutely.
How would people know him?
Well, like I said, Get Shorty.
All right, okay, sorry.
And Rum Punch, which was Rum Punch is
Elmore Leonard.
He died in 2013. He was quite old, but he was famous for doing westerns. But then he started doing crime, black comedy crime up to the 80s onwards into the 90s. And one of my favorite books by him, I mean, Out of Sight's another one with Jennifer Lopez and George Clooney.
It's madness, isn't
based
it?
On,
it's
based on his book.
It's just that whole thing of like, do you know what sparked this? What was, which is what we're talking about now. What sparked Fauville? What's the back story?
Yeah, so Fauville really,
you know what I mean?
So we get to a year later, right? I'm 22 and I start...
So you've stopped parkour, you've met up with this guy and he recommends Stephen King's memoirs, and then you're reading a lot more, and you've had this peaceful divorce.
Yeah, peaceful divorce.
I love you. How did that go? How do you sign off on that?
I just decided I was done. There was no kicking or screaming. There was no...
Or was it just like...
It was just... You know what?
I'm asking for a friend.
It felt like a weight off my shoulders, because I realised at that moment in time, I could quit.
So what was before that then?
Because don't forget, like...
So before you quit, what was the aim with parkour?
To become a professional athlete, because I did get very good at it. Towards the very end. I got very, very good at it.
The stuff you were doing, I was like, shit, damn, fucking hell. I want to do that.
I said it earlier about as growing up, I had confidence issues and I wasn't very good at articulating myself and wasn't very good at picking up on social cues.
Was this relatable? I mean, maybe we jump in with that whole kind of, I'm not a big fan of labels, but there are definitely learning styles and preferences we all have. I'm playing with this, or investigating, I should say, this myself, and inquiring to see, like when my doctor said to me, well, that's cool, what will you do with that? But it's also, cool, you got ASD or Asperger's or whatever, now what? But it definitely helps to know how you work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, how you retain information, how you perceive it.
Yeah, this is how, and it's not kind of a deficit, which is some people have,
no, it's just an alternative.
Syndrome, or it's just, this is how you work.
Yeah, there's pros and cons, isn't there?
Yeah. Some people would love those skills.
Parkour's such an independent sport. Like, there's a group dynamic to it. You go to different towns and there'd be like 30 of you, but when it came down to the actual practice side of it,
you're not. No one's jumping for you, are they?
You're on your own. You are on your own.
When we were doing some stuff and we're doing jumps, specific jumps, what do you call it?
Precision
jumps.
Precision is a static
where you stand somewhere and you jump to somewhere else.
Yeah, precision. That's basic. One of the basic movements.
Yeah, we were doing some bits and pieces, and I was like,
or stride is when you kind of link it up. Strides.
Right. Yeah.
And but parkour was so beneficial for me because it sort of kind of like Spider-Man, because I used to watch the old Spider-Man movies.
Is that how that come about then?
Well, no, not necessarily. But going back to those films when I was doing parkour, I started to see the resemblance between this alter ego. You know what I mean? I was starting to create this other identity that was beyond just regular me at school, the nerdy Daniel Pike, school. Suddenly I'm like, when I'm out of school, I'm this other personality, right?
That's the Banana Man one. But when Eric goes home,
that's in the Dandy.
Eric is Banana Man.
That's in the Dandy. Yeah. I can't remember his name, but that's the thing. So suddenly I'm starting to create these two personalities, right? There's this distinction, and I would become more confident, more able, and more, believing more in myself. But then there comes a point where that becomes irrelevant, because I'm 21 years of age. It's like, okay, but this doesn't define me. This isn't a part of my identity anymore. There's more to life than just jumping about, because sooner or later...
There's more. You just can't keep jumping about.
You can't keep running away. But, because I'm glad, because there's a glass ceiling on that sort of career. I did an interview with one of my idols, a man named Ryan Doyle, who's probably one of the best free-running athletes in the world, 2-time world champion. He's 36 now and he's fucked.
Right. I watched Boba Fett, however you pronounce it. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene in there where they're running across the rooftops. And my first thought was like, look, Jackie Chan. I mean, those School of Arts. I was watching those movies. They were all doing shit. Parkour was just, I don't know who the fucking, Jackie Chan was doing. To me, when I was watching Jackie Chan as a kid, he was doing that anyway. And then obviously it found its way. And then even now it's like, it's found its way everywhere. Everybody can all of a sudden, the moves where you skip over stuff, it's everywhere. Like that skill set has now found its way into most action movies, and it's really useful. Anyway, I like the idea of having certain skills to overcome objects. Like people say, why would the whole kind of muscle up? Remember the whole idea of a muscle up? Why do a muscle up? But you never know when you're going to be on a cliff. It's like, why the fuck am I going to be on a cliff edge? But there's definitely a lot of carryover, surely, into life now.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You're presented with a problem, and it's down to you, the individual, to find a solution to that. Yeah. Right?
But the idea of becoming a professional, kick the fucking ass out your own body, like you say, is probably... I mean, how old was that guy? 36.
Yeah, and he's got like rod in his leg, artificial tendons in his shoulders and all that. The guy's his career's over now.
I can hear there's a physio saying to me one day, because I got a rod in my leg and we were talking, and we was like, And I did it playing basketball, not martial arts of all things. And I was really into martial arts, but it put me off martial arts. When I snapped my leg, the first thing I thought of was that there's a YouTube fight with a black and a white guy. I forget who kicks who, but that was what went through my head. I'm like, oh, I've seen this before, it's all right. So it put me off fighting. But the idea of, like you say, there's this whole, like, oh man, really, physically, you realise, I mean, getting hit in the head's not smart.
No.
You know, the knee replacement game isn't that great out there. No. Hip replacements are really good by all accounts. Like you say, I don't, and I'm thinking, fuck that. So it was that part of it, you're like, you know, did any of that come into it?
I didn't really have that awareness because when you're that age, when you're that young, you realise you feel like you're invincible. Because even when you do get injured and it kind of knocks you down a few pegs, you do get better.
So you left really when you had still
had like 5 years left in me.
Yeah.
But just a little voice in my head said it's over. And I went to Scotland to go see my granny. Me and my dad would make the kind of like once every 2 year pilgrimage to Scotland, to the motherland.
We're going home.
And I remember, again, this is 2013. This is about around the time I'd quit. And I took a couple of books with me. One of them was Philip K. Dick's book, Ubik. That's a very good book, Ubik. I'll tell you about that in a second. And I'm sat in her back garden. It was summertime, and we'd gone to Waterstones. Me and my dad had gone up to Oban, which is like a seaside town. Yeah, it's about 100
In fact, I've heard of it because it's a whiskey.
Yeah,
I've drank a whiskey called Oban.
Oban. Yeah, so it's 100 miles north of Glasgow.
Don't quote me on that.
No, it is Oban. It is Oban. It's 100 miles north of Glasgow. It's a fisherman's town, very quaint, very, very chill. And there's a Waterstones up there, and I grabbed a few Philip K. Dick books. One of them was a short story. One of them was We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which became Total Recall.
Right.
And I'm back at my granny's and all that, and I'm just reading Ubik and all that, and suddenly I just realised this is what I want to be.
Right.
I want to be a writer.
So you'd had the divorce at this point?
This was around that time, the same month.
Were they this? Did it happen separately, or was it like a merging throughout the do you know what I mean?
About 2 weeks prior, that's when I had that moment up the wall.
Right, yeah.
I reached the wall and I said, I think I'm done.
And then
2 weeks
later, you had this.
I go to Glasgow.
Yeah.
And I'm reading in my granny's spare bedroom, and I'm just feeling like this creative. I don't know what it is. Like my mind just opened. I was like, I love these words. The way I feel reading this book, because I'd already read this book once or twice before, but just reading it again, I was like, the way I feel reading these words is how I want to feel. And obviously, I meet that Anthony guy. He gets me on the memoir. This, that, and the other.
Because it's an interesting thing with you. You could like replacing things. Because it's a tough one. Like you see it with athletes, professional athletes. Like, who the fuck are you now? In the interview with Jeff Thompson, he's like, it's funny actually because he fucking called me out on it. I remember going, I like to keep a bit in the tank and all this stuff, making out some fucking hard man, and it was like out of nowhere. He's like, but who are you without that? I was like, fuck. Yeah, I just set myself up for a learning, and it was like, who am I without the right straight? Who am I without the brawn? Who am I without parkour or basketball? And like a lot of athletes get to that point.
It's the ego, innit? The pain body. You strip it away. What are you remain with?
Who are you when you remain? But the thing is, you still have a desire to have feelings. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like you're reading this stuff and then you're generating these feelings. Because I'm wondering what kind of feelings you used to get. Yeah, that sense of achievement you get from fucking doing a precision jump.
Yeah, with parkour, you felt like the Übermensch. We'll get into that later. I'm tapping into this.
How many laters have we got? We've got about 4 laters. I'm keeping tabs.
Loads.
We're going to have to do another podcast.
Probably.
I would imagine so.
But you're tapping into the Übermensch, which is this version of yourself that's our own perception of ourselves.
And the Übermensch,
it comes from Friedrich Nietzsche. Yeah. I don't know much about the man's work because the problem is like people quote these fucking philosophers, right? And you think, oh, that's very profound. But then you get around to reading their work and it's like, fuck me, this is just a ramblings of a fucking madman.
I think actually I looked into it a little bit after you said about it, and turns out, I think there's elements of him being a proper nerd.
Yeah, it's like I just like people I like people to give me the quotes. I like people to give me the quotes. I don't want to go through that. I don't want to read through a book this thick by Søren Kierkegaard because all he's going on about is Giovanni, whatever his name is. Anyway, so with the journey, let's roll forward to 2014.
Do you go from the room, you're in your nan's, you've had this, is it your nanny, gran?
Yeah, my dad's side of the family, yeah.
And then you go, so from there, and then what happens from there? How do you get to the start of Fauville? So
I get made redundant at the gym, right? And then I eventually fall into the job of Holiday Park by that spring of 2014.
Which, if anybody knows about seaside towns or particularly with seaside towns, and I've noticed is that there's always that that up and down. Like there's a holiday season. And
so March to October is a holiday season, and then outside of that, you're on your ass.
Yeah, literally, it's like a proper
luckily
bipolar town. It's on, it's off. It literally switches like that.
It's very hard to find a job. Luckily, for the last 3 years, I've had a job that's all year round. But so let's roll forward to 2014 April. Right, so I'm 6 because the initial elation I felt when I got this this Haven job as a lifeguard sports coach was over the moon because I'm over the moon. I'm like, yes, finally full time. Full time work. I'm chuffed to bits.
Yeah, it's a different world out there. I go to those places and it's like I didn't think I heard from you for a bit, and I would touch base here and there. Yeah. But it is one of those kind of, it's another like world to itself.
It's Disney.
So I've worked in those places.
It's what John Baudrillard refers to as a hyper reality.
Yeah.
Right, and I'll give you we'll go deep on this one. So I'm about 6 weeks into the job, and I'm just teaching some archery or something like that. It was a nice day. Like spring starts creeping in, and I go to this meeting, and I'm watching this video, and it was very well presented because drones had just come out, like commercial drones.
Right.
So it's got Katy Perry playing in the background.
They've changed the world.
Yeah,
like
and
drones,
watching this,
you can instead of having a helicopter now for that.
Exactly.
You and me can
every time I watch an action movie now, I think, oh fuck, that must have cost a fortune.
Yeah. Exactly.
So on my way in, right, the place was deserted, right, because it was off season, right. The Easter season hadn't quite kicked in yet. It was a few days away.
That's when it kind of starts, isn't it? You kind of get people in, and then Easter, you're going to get a little tipple of it, and then
So I'm walking into this meeting because it's fucking dead, but it's a nice day, and I sat down watching this presentation, which was very well filmed, good production, and I get chatting to this groundskeeper, young lad, a couple of years older than me. And he's telling me what he does, this, that, and the other. And then I walk out, and I just had this profound awareness. Suddenly, there's fucking groundkeepers everywhere, laying the slabs, cutting the grass, checking the gas levels of the mobile homes. It's
pretty full on, yeah.
And I'm just like, none of this is fucking real, because I just seen that DVD of the Katy Perry song with the drone footage, and I'm like, they're selling an idea to these poor working class folk who are lucky to probably get one vacation a year.
Yeah.
Right. And they're trying to create this image. It's like what Jean Baudrillard says, a hyper reality. It's like Disneyland. It's a simulacra. It's a false representation of something that is real. Or I mean, there's 4 different versions of it. I don't want to go too in depth with it, but basically what he's saying is that it's a reflection of society, or it's a reflection of something, and it's not an original thing. The nice house, the cut grass, the slabs, the fucking tiger. The kids all happy, the brochure. You know what I'm talking about. It's
absolutely. I've done quite a few seasons.
And I realised,
of holiday parks.
This job, I'm like, holy shit, because this job is like 50 hours, 60 hours a week. It's just, they just rinse you because you're young and you're malleable.
It's hard to say no.
You're malleable.
Well, it's not necessarily hard to say no. I think it's...
Well, you're malleable and you can recover from it quick. Right?
Yeah. And it's fun.
And I just had this idea of a, and this isn't the novel, this is just a short story, right? But I had this idea of a concept of, and it wasn't that particularly original because it's very reminiscent of, or very derivative of The Truman Show. Right.
Okay,
I'm like,
right.
I need to get out of here. But how the fuck do I get out of here? And suddenly I came up with this idea of a soldier, David, just needs to get out of this fucking false representation of reality that's been sold to him as legit. And he can't remember nothing.
Sold a fucking lie, sir.
And over about 4 weeks, I started writing this short story called Fauville. But it was only a short story. But that would eventually serve as the basis for the first act in the novel, right? But it was a lot of fun to write, even though it's quite half-baked. Like, it still exists to this day, this short story, but it's very half-baked, and I was 22 at the time. But the seed had been planted.
Half-baked? As in...
like, it's just a bit, it's flimsy at best in terms of...
I was thinking of the other kind of baked.
It's flimsy in terms of solid story.
Right.
But the ideas were there, the characters were there.
So that was kind of the birth, if you would. Would you say that was the birth?
Yes and no. That was the birth, because a lot of novels come from short stories.
Yeah.
And I like to think of the actual thing itself as the way later, because this was something else. This was just me entertaining existential ideas.
So when you had that, how did you get to way later? So where is way later?
So... so a year later, I decided, by this point, I'm quite into my learning French.
Because I forgot about that. So you'd been trickling along with this here and there for a while. When did that start?
That was around 2012, 2013. I'd heard, I was walking through the Eurotunnel, the Eurostar train station, which is right next to St. Pancras. So in order for me to go see my dad up in Corby, I change over at Waterloo over to St. Pancras, and right next to St. Pancras is the Eurostar. So you'll hear the tannoy speaking in French.
Right.
Votre attention, s'il vous plaît. Right. And I didn't understand the word it was saying, but I just had an idea in my head, the impulsiveness in me. I was like, I'm going to learn French. I'm 21 years old. I'm going to fucking learn French. I get 6 lessons, get a passport. 6 months later, I'm in Montpellier. And I'm like, I've memorized this.
Yeah.
I've listened to this. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was like 2 people just struggling to keep up with this Frenchman. And I memorized one of the sentences towards the end of the lesson. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's like, I still remember this sentence, right? But it's said so poorly as, je regrette, mais je n'ai pas le temps de le faire parce que je suis très occupé. Translation: I'm sorry, but I don't have the time to do it because I'm very busy. Right? I think I said that, but I think I said it right. I'm paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
And I get off the plane in Montpellier. First time I've been on a plane in my life, 21 years of age. I'm like, fucking yeah, I'm ready for this, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I see the baggage handler guy having an argument with another baggage handler guy, arguing in French. I'm
French.
I'm like, oh shit. Because the first thing I noticed about France, it's full of French people. Right? I know that sounds obvious, but what I'm trying to say is like,
with you.
Holy shit, they are French.
Yeah.
I've seen it on TV, I've seen it in movies.
You've seen a TV show.
Fuck me, they are French as fuck. I know I'm stating the obvious. But anyway, so I kept getting knocked back and I kept failing and I kept coming back and going over again. And I just...
What do you mean by knocked back and failing? What do you mean
I get there and
what was your aim to get knocked back from? What were you going over
just to be
live?
fluent. To be fluent, to mix
so you
in
go over there to kind of like,
mix in with the culture and try and settle down and find myself, because again, the parkour thing's come to an end now. It's like, who am I? Yeah, I like writing. Okay. I like writing short stories, but I also want to integrate myself into this culture. And that happens a couple of times, but I'm 24 years of age now, right? Written a few short stories, and I'm working at New Look head office because now I'm half decent.
Are we allowed to say that? Of course you can. That's a fact, isn't it?
Yeah, that's sound. I've got nothing bad to say about them. I can talk about my personal feelings about the job, no issue. I'm not going to disparage anyone because it is what it is. You're either built for office work or you're not. And I'm not.
Yeah, well, there's fucking TV fucking programs about office work, and you know what I mean, there's a whole culture around.
Yeah, I'll just say this right now. I ain't built for office work, but I'll go into more details, right? So I'm 24 years of age, and I land myself a job as a French-speaking IT analyst, right? Because there's very few French-speaking people in Weymouth that are willing to work for 18,500 a year.
Yeah,
and then there's me. 24 years of age, like,
well, yeah, of course, I'm going to get married. Yeah, I want to, you know.
I'll speak on the phone for 3 meatballs.
Yeah,
come on up. And like I said, I was half decent language, right?
A little bit of spaghetti.
And I thought, you know what, it will challenge me.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's the challenge I've been looking for the last 3 years. Wow, I get to speak French every day. I'm going to be fluent in no time.
What was that like? How quickly? I mean, did that run out?
I was very enthusiastic at first. For the first 3 months, I was really engaged. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. You know what I mean? I had so much willingness and eagerness, and I was very...
How long before that shit got knocked out? Yeah.
So you get 3 months into it, and I start realizing, hang on a minute, these guys are fucking hypocrites. Not anyone in particular. I'm just saying, like, some certain managers had their hands tied, so you know they had to do one thing and say another. Right? Basically, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and I'm starting to, me being who I am, right? Even though I'm not quite who I'm at the level I'm at now at 29 years of age, at 24, I'm starting to question the system. I'm starting to question the authority in the sense that I don't understand what you're trying to say, right? Long story short, because I'm smoking a lot of weed in the evenings with this job, right?
Right.
Just my time, downtime, escapism, whatever you want to call it, and I'm creatively bankrupt. I just can't write nothing, with no desire to read. I realise, well, here was the pinnacle moment. I'm working a Saturday shift, and the office is pretty much empty. I'm about 9 months into the job, and I look over to the left, and I see some cards, celebration cards, and one of them says, "Happy 20 years."
No, what are you saying about this, actually?
One of them, happy 15 years, but the one next to it said, happy 25 years, or well done 25 years. And I stopped and thought, I'm 24. Someone's worked here longer than I've fucking been alive, right? Longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
I was like, I had an epiphany. I was like, I have to get out of here. I'm not done yet. Being young and full of wonder and joy, right?
I don't know if those jobs can do that anymore. Like, I think the culture's changed. I think there is that, because it's such a scary thing, doesn't it? I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
The next, what would you be till you're 24? You'd have been like, what? 49?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Imagine, well done, Dan. You've made it through. Here's your cake.
Yeah. One of the things as well, another thing I kept noticing as well is, like, I kept noticing women walking up and down the office floor, and every other day they would have a bump. And I was like, they're married to people in different departments. So their partners were in the same building.
Oh.
And they get married and they have children and that's it. And then the girl behind me, she was always looking up her next holiday. I was starting to see the ground. There was this sort of cyclical nature.
Which is fine if that's your game.
Yeah, if that's their game, but it wasn't my game.
No.
Right? And that was the last straw with seeing those cards. I was like, I'm done. So I go on Google.
Just press pause on that for a second.
Yeah, no worries.
And just close the window. No, listen, we'll be out there. Just hold tight down here. We'll be out in a minute. Listen, we'll be out in a minute. Won't be long. I'm toying with I didn't realise I'm toying with the idea. I think I might have to at the time of the podcast with the dogs, I might have to kind of put them in on a little bed, a raised bed there, so they can I'll figure something out going forward.
All right.
Listen, we'll be out. Leave that. We'll be out in a minute.
All right, give me the go signal.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll just carry on. We'll leave it.
Cool.
We'll let it run, man.
So
you get to 25 years.
Right.
We'll be out in a minute. Leave it. We'll be out in a minute.
So that was the last straw for me, and I go Google. I can't remember specifically what I Googled, but I typed in something along like couch surf or places to stay in Bordeaux because I decided there, and I was going to go to France, but I was like, whereabouts in France? Where have I not been yet? Let's try Bordeaux. Never been to Bordeaux, right? The wine, the city of wine.
It reminds me of wine. Yeah, if I thought Bordeaux, I'd think wine.
And a guy gets in touch with me called Lionel, and he's like, "Yeah, I got a place you can stay, €200 a month." I'm like, decent. I handed my month's notice in there and then.
Right, so literally, wow.
£5,000 saved up in the bank, and I go there. But deep down inside, I'm going there to restart my parkour career.
Right.
That was the intention.
Okay, no way.
That was the false intention. And
was that like you made everyone aware of, or was that something just between
people
you and
were quite
yourself?
surprised? But once my mum realised how miserable I was at this job, she was like, "Yeah, you need to go do what you want to do. Right? You can speak the language, see what happens." And then I get there, and I stay in a hotel for the first 2 weeks, and straight away I get there, get my map out. Right, where's the bank? Where's the supermarket? Where's the gym? I'm exploring this place with a paper map because I've got very little internet access outside the hotel. And I remember the moment. This is when it happened. The character, right? Now, I'd already written the short stories and all that, but I didn't have a solid character. And I've got my headphones in, and I'm walking through Saint-Michel, which is the south part of Bordeaux, towards the gym. Point Libre, it was called. And
Point Libre.
Point Libre. It means free weights. Point is weight, weights, and libre is free. So Point Libre, free weights.
Libre,
Libre, L-I-B-R-E.
Oh, Libre, yeah.
Libre, right. And so I'm going, and I'm pretty much the only white face in this part of town. Right. No one bothered me. It's like they could smell the poverty on me because I'm wearing little scabby tracksuit bottoms with a.
It's okay. It's one of us. He's just got a different colour.
Yeah, tattered sports hodl. You know,
ghettos are the same everywhere.
And I've got my headphones in, and I had a notepad on me just in case I decided to start writing because I had no intention of writing while I was over there. And I thought, how can I write about a veteran if I've never been a soldier? But then I'm walking, just after I've left the gym, I'm walking, I've got a cigarette in my mouth, and I'm listening to The Doors, People Are Strange. You know how the song goes?
People are strangers.
When you're a stranger, faces look ugly, right? And I'm listening to it, and people are giving me a wide berth. I'm a fucking ghost, right? And I thought,
no one acknowledges you. It's like, am I real?
The light bulb goes off. I'm like, I might not be a soldier, therefore a veteran, but I'm a foreigner. That's the next best thing. And I'm hit with this inspiration. And I start writing about this soldier in this city, lost, with no place to go. He doesn't know who the fuck he is. That was the origins of Fauville. So in February of 2017, I put pen to paper. And 4 months later, I had a completed first draft, and I came back to the UK.
There it is.
Yeah, so
it makes sense.
Have a look at it, man. Like, see what you think. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've read it. I mean, I like the feel of it. I think it's.
So I told you earlier about the front cover. The front cover is by Stéphane Martinier. He'd done this photo. This picture is called Memory. It was done back in 2007.
Right. Was this the one you said that?
I'd had it on my wall for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'd reached out to him and I said, I'm getting this book published. I'd be very honoured if you want to do the front cover for me, because I'd already corresponded with this man previously for his artwork. So, yeah. And he said, look, it's going to cost about $5,000, but you're more than welcome to purchase the second-hand rights to any pre-existing work.
No way.
And straight away I was like, I know which one I want.
You're right, yeah. And it was
Memory, which had been on my wall since 2012. And I look at it.
So that's what he called it. He called it Memory.
It's called Memory.
And obviously, I don't want to spoil the book for anybody.
You can say a little bit. but he's got amnesia.
Book is about the guy, the fact. So that's the irony. No way.
And it almost looks a bit like a cross between me and my dad. And what else I like about it is that his face is one half in shadow.
Okay.
And it kind of adds to this sinister side to it. And when you've read the book, you know what's up.
Yeah, I know what's up. Yeah, it's. I thought it was you initially because I'm like, oh no, how much of it? Obviously, I get when I read the book. How much would you say is? Because this is an interesting way with people that want to write books. Like there's the whole kind of I've told the world about my fucking story and I've spoke about it on the video, but there's also the written format that I'll do, and you think, do I do this as a story? You know what I mean? So there's no if you want to, what do they call those books that give you exercises at the end and shit? But how much of this book, let's get to the question, is about you and your life? Like you say, when you're walking through Bordeaux or on the way to the gym.
Point libre.
Well, here's the thing. On your way there, yeah. How much of it's about you, Dan, and your life experience?
I'd say about 80%.
Because I've got a question here, because this is from the book. Maybe we should go into that a little bit. So in the book it mentions about PTSD. And you mentioned obviously soldiers and stuff. And the question I've asked is quite an interesting question. How big of an effect, or your knowledge of PTSD, tell me about that. How has it affected you? How has it influenced you?
Yeah, so I experienced it firsthand. My dad, for those who don't know, his name's Pike, the Corby poet. He was a soldier. He served between 1980 to 1985 in the 1st Battalion Scots Guards. I want to say 1st Battalion. And he was in Ireland in 1981 up until about 82, I want to say. His first tour, his only tour in Ireland. And that fucked him up. Right. He openly said that because he's from Glasgow and he's walking through Belfast, which is very similar aesthetically to Glasgow.
Right.
It's got that sort of, what do you want to say, Georgian architecture with those big windows coming out.
Right, okay.
I'd guess, you know what I mean?
It's not like the cold, damp kind of, I get the impression it's quite like, it's
very similar.
The weather.
Aesthetically, it's very similar. Yeah. It's just different accents and different culture. But, on the surface level, it's very similar. It's going to mess with your head. Because it's not a different, if you've got people who fought in Vietnam or people who fought in Afghanistan, it's a completely different environment. Yeah,
it's almost like another world. You can just leave it. Wow.
And he experienced that, but not even just that. I mean, there's other things going way back before, but it was just an accumulation of things. And growing up with that, I lived with them between the ages of 4 and 8. And
because there's references to some stuff in the book, and me knowing you, it gave me some insights into the life for you, potentially, as a child growing up. So did that influence, obviously I presume it influenced the book as well?
Yeah, so I'll try not to give too much away of the book, but I suppose by this point, by the time this comes out, a lot of people would have read it anyway. But I'll keep it as vague as possible without going into too much details. I'll talk around it rather than directly towards it. But with my dad, growing up, he's a big Glaswegian man, muscly, strong.
Because you're quite tall. I mean, what you're saying, you're probably a bit taller than me.
I'm 6 foot, but he's 6'2".
You're probably about 6'1", 6'2".
He's 6'2".
So
when you're a 3-year-old child and you're looking up at this man, you're like, this man is the biggest, strongest man in the universe, right? And that's mentioned in the book. He's invincible. Yeah. You see your parents as infallible.
It's crazy.
And that's what he was. He was infallible.
I never had that.
And,
not with my parents.
But you know what I mean? But as a child, you just think, wow, this man's big and strong and can do no wrong. And when I went to go live with him between the ages of 4 and 8, one of his first priorities was to stimulate me because I was very erratic as a child, and he could keep up with me. He's very athletic in his 30s, into his 40s, and he educated me. I get home from school, 5 years of age. Right, here's the map of the world. Right, we'll go for it. Alaska, Canada, America, Mexico. Right. We're going through it every day.
Yeah.
He gets me books on anatomy. He gets me books on space, on the cosmos, you know what I mean? And it really fed my yearning to want to know more. He'd teach me how to tie my shoelace, teach me how to ride a bike. And by the way, my mum's fucking done a terrific job as well, but I'm just saying, but these particular years.
That father-son bonding thing, I never had that, so it's like, but it's a thing. I've seen it in people, I hear people speak about it, like you say, it's potentially the Ubermensch.
Yeah, that plays a massive part into it.
The guy who is...
Yeah, he's starting to provide to me certain values that I myself will cherish, right? And as a child, you sort of indulge in it fully without questioning it too much. And, I knew that he had a temper growing up, but anything out the norm. It's just like, it wasn't until you kind of associate with other children and you see their parents, how their parents behave, you start to kind of think, hang on a minute,
there's the contrast.
My dad's not fucking normal. You know what I mean? Something's not quite right.
He acts differently than that.
No, he wasn't a bad man by any means, but he had a temper. And it's not until you get older and he himself went on that journey that he's, oh fuck, I have PTSD. But it wasn't diagnosed till way later, and you realise...
Yeah, because it got called... I was hearing the other day about stuff about...
you realise it's not normal for someone to just go from 1 to 10 like that. That's not a normal human behaviour. There's something caused that.
Now I know.
But as a child... Yeah, but as a child...
How can Andy get to 100?
Yeah, but
he was -2 earlier on.
Yeah, but as a child, you just think, oh, Dad's angry.
Yeah. Because I guess you don't have any references, and people don't necessarily, as children, you don't know until you start to get around.
Until you become an adult, and then you have that conversation with your parents.
But that's the thing, Evan. Is how's life now? And I'm just kind of aware of time, and we're good for time.
Let's keep going.
It's. But I wanted to ask you, so I want to delve into it a little bit. So yeah, because you just mentioned about being an adult, and it's something my friend said to me in passing. And he said, as adults, looking back at it. And I was like, fucking hell. And obviously I've done a lot of time, like therapy, that's my job, you know what I mean? I'm a therapist or whatever. And you understand how to look back at things. But it was just the way, it's like, oh yeah, now I'm not a child anymore. And it was just for a second, obviously you knew that. But it's the way it got called out. And then speaking with people as adults, you know what I mean? So... I had it with my mum when I sat her down and told her about all the abuse and stuff with me. It was like, there was this weird kind of like dilemma or trilemma. There was loads. Do I get somebody to sit in on a conversation? Because it's pretty hectic. Or will she be someone else? Will she act up and not be an adult? Will she go into a character, a defensive mode? And I wanted to be not a victim either. I didn't want to be her son. I didn't want to be, you know what I mean? It's like I just wanted to be me as an adult. So I want to speak, like we're speaking now, just adult to adult. We get that there's this shift in, from child, you know what I mean? So how was that conversation for you?
With the old man?
Yeah, when you became, when you spoke out, when you had that. So if I'm right in saying you had a bit of space.
Yeah, so when I was 8 years of age, my mother took custody of me again because whatever he was dealing with was catching up with him. Like he describes it in his own words as the wheels fell out from under him at the age of 40. A breakdown began at that point. But even I remember at 7 years of age, that last year of being with him, I could start noticing the patterns of something occurring. A storm was brewing of some sorts.
So how long was it until you spoke or maybe seen him again?
I want to say the proper conversation we had would be in 11 years later. Right. So like I said, when I'm about 7 going into 8 years of age, I start noticing a change in his behaviour. Not towards me specifically, but I'm noticing more and more that I'm accompanying him to pubs more often, whereas usually we'll be going out and doing things. And whatever he did in his own time, he did on the weekends, like a Saturday, Sunday when I'll be at my mother's, but he'd be working on the cabs.
Yeah.
Or whatever he did it in his own time.
Yeah.
But now suddenly I'm tagging along at these pubs, which is not unusual because you've got to bear in mind, again, this sort of like miniature version of Scotland. It was very normal.
Part of the culture. Yeah, exactly.
You get pied off with all the other kids and the kids are playing.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, so roll the clock forward to 10 years later, and I'm 19 years old. My dad had gone through hepatitis C. He had that disease.
I'm not sure which. I've had like some jabs for that.
Something like something to do with the liver.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously drinking don't help, but you can contract it through bad needles or bad tattoos or blood.
Trying to get all the protection of good blood. I think it was hep C. Yeah.
And
is that what Pamela Anderson had as well or something?
I believe so, yeah. So, but I'm 18 years of age and he tells me, look, I'm having this treatment, interferon treatment. And it's lots of medication and you're doing...
This is where we're like, we need a Jamie or someone here.
Yeah.
And then there's the screen and we can just both go like, no way, so hep C is...
Yeah, well, so you get a weekly injection for 48 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the treatment's 48 weeks? I had no idea.
Oh, man, it just rinsed him. Like, he'd be on the couch for Monday, Tuesday, and by Wednesday he'd be able to get out and do a bit of work.
You can look at anything if you want me to search anything.
Nah, it's all good, you know. I mean, I'm giving you the brief...
So 48 weeks of these injections.
Yeah, and then by the time he gets to the end of that, I go visit him again, and we go to Scotland. And I've said this on a previous podcast, but me and him went to Loch Orr. So we went to we did a pilgrim to Glasgow.
Right.
And we had our first conversation as men where all had been forgiven. Because talking about the Joseph Campbell idea of rejecting the primary father figure.
Okay.
He was my primary father figure. but I slowly begin to, on a subconscious level, reject him when I get to my teenage years. He's still there, he's still there in my life, but I'm starting to branch out into other external, what's the word I'm looking for? There's these other external influences out there because of grunge.
Role models.
Well, there's grunge music. There's, what I mean? I'm starting to go out as a young adult. I'm starting to go to these gigs. I'm starting to go to these youth clubs. I'm starting to do things as an independent.
If you take the hero's journey, for instance, you've left the confines of the home, the normality, and you're now going on that experience. And at some point, you come back.
I'm being more influenced by my peers, more than my parents by this point. 14 years of age, sort of thing. That's how I kind of get involved in parkour. Got the whole floppy fringe going on, the baggy bell-bottom jeans, the fucking sweaty shirt, and so in a way that could be defined as a sort of rejection of my father's influence. Like he's still my life. I still go see him on a weekly basis. Oh, hey Dad, how's it going? You know what I mean? It's like a relatively normal relationship, but with not much depth. And then, so I'd sort of rejected him. But then, come 19 years of age, right? We have that conversation. His treatment's gone well. And it's like deep down inside, I'm like, yes, he's going to be okay. And I'm just trying to think now. Yeah, so we're skimming stones up Lockall. And then I started to have a real appreciation for his poetry because he did a performance.
Right.
Because one time, right, he's driving cabs. This is before his treatment. This is because basically, to give you a timeline, between the ages of 40 and 49 was his crazy period. The drinking, the drugs. And then by the age of 49, he just sort of... He's done.
I got mine done earlier, I think. I hope there's no more.
It's called his lost. We call it the lost weekend because John Lennon broke up with Yoko Ono for about 18 months, and during that 18-month period, he went off the rails and he calls it his lost weekend. So my dad's lost weekend was 40 to 49,
nice.
And then 50 he has the treatment and he's good. And so he writes during his recovery. He's writing poems, and he'd been doing poems for years, but this is when he gets his first book together. And I watch him perform in a new place called the Cube, and it's like a theatre.
So he's like,
is that gonna be all right for the sound?
Yeah, it's fine. These are thingy mics.
So it should be fine. So there's a place being built in Corby called the Cube. It's a fancy little cube architectural float glass windows and all that. So it's like a mirror.
So is this him doing like the stand up, delivering his poetry live?
So what happens is he's seen that being built 2 years prior while he's still going through his lost weekend. He's in a taxi because he was a functioning addict, so he still worked. All through this.
Right.
So fair play to him for that. And he sees it being built, and he says to himself, "I'm going to perform in there, one day." And then 2 years later, just after his interferon treatment, he performs his first book in front of an audience of about 50 people, and I'm there.
Right.
And he does a poem called "Sexy Chef," and it was a kind of tongue-in-cheek, crude poem about Nigella Lawson.
Can this be watched on YouTube or anything? Or
I don't know. I'll have a look for it. I'll get my dad to send it to you. But it was. I'm not joking, right? Because obviously, when you're a kid and all that, and your dad's like, "Oh, I'm going to read some poetry," you kind of cringe. But this was the first time that I belly laughed at his poetry. It was fucking hilarious. The whole crowd was roaring with laughter.
And this would you say this is the adult kind of?
This was about a month before we did that trip to Scotland, and I'm listening to his poetry. I'm like, wow, he's good. Like I said with Blade Runner, I just came online to literature. I was and I've really appreciated his work. Like this was it.
And if people at home are thinking about looking for some inspiration to get into reading, this is. I've read the Celestine Prophecies. Maybe I read that. I read like maybe a couple of books, but it's inspired me. Like you're saying there about the poetry. It's funny how reading this is like, I could read some more of that. Yeah,
and here's the thing as well is, he gets out the other side of this lost weekend and he's doing what he loves, and that's poetry. And then we have that conversation. So in a weird kind of twist, I rejected the primary father figure, but he essentially went through a rebirth because essentially a part of him had died during that treatment. But I think it's the part of him that he didn't.
Is it Campbell? No. Oh, I had this the other day about.
Well, it's Joseph.
You got the archetypes. And then
it's Carl Jung.
Yeah, there we go.
Carl Jung.
So Carl Jung talks about the archetypes, and then there's I was listening to some woman. She was talking about the tunnel. I forget her name. I'll have to.
Look it up.
And
but
we'll do another.
So, and there's been these weird quasi father figures during that 10-year period, that lost weekend.
Quasi. Always, whenever I hear quasi. I always think of Dr. Evil, and he's like
quasi evil. I'm the Diet Coke of evil.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So my dad, I had these weird sort of hybrid father figures, like Joseph Campbell says, you put yourself into apprenticeship of other men, or other. It doesn't even have to be men, but you put yourself in apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And they all kind of had the same type of construct to my dad's behaviors: temperamental but wise.
Is that like how you saw me?
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck's
Yeah.
this
Essentially,
crazy
you thought.
guy?
Well, we'll get to that in a second, right? So anyway, but they say you reject your primary father figure, but then you choose your secondary father as an adult, right?
Right.
And in a weird twist of events, I essentially rejected my primary father figure, which was my dad, during that period of his life. But then he comes out on the other side, essentially reborn a new man on the other side of his recovery. And, you know, being in Loch Awe and seeing him perform his poetry and seeing him be so happy, it's like I chose him as my secondary father figure because our relationship had changed. The dynamic had changed.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Whereas we became men. We had our first conversation as men, and it's like, oh, he is now my second. I'm choosing him to be my secondary father figure. It's
almost like a permission either way. Like there's the whole, I suppose, you can't get it because you're a child. Like children can't get adult life. That's why they're so vulnerable and innocent. But then there's a point where even when you could get along as adults, there's still like you say, an exception. It's still got I'm not going to let you in. I'm going to reject you. There's an acceptance. There's a crazy phase, isn't it? Because most people have to go through it. You imagine, because you know when you need to grow up, you need to think about becoming a man and get your priorities straight and all this shit and fucking. I'm trying to find this thing. It's not. I can't find it. At the moment.
In the book Fauville, David has his alter ego called Spike, and it's kind of a accumulation of his trauma and his own inner child's perception of his own father. This infallible being who is very intelligent, very strong, and very able in ways that he is not. And because someone who suffers with dissociative identity disorder, they sort of separate themselves from the trauma and put it into this other hypothetical.
Because there's lots of references in the book to this kind of stuff, and like I said, I was just curious to what is, you know, without going into the book, but how has PTSD,
one of the main influences,
if you would, in a good way.
It definitely shaped me because when you're watching someone suffer, when you're growing up with someone suffering with it, it affects those closest to them because you're seeing them suffer. And it's not really until the dust settles and they start to, like Carl Jung says, you know, there's that 4 stages of the transformation. First, there's the confession. And my dad confessed that through his poetry. And then there's the explanation, followed by the education, and then finally transformation. And I went through that with him because his confession was his poetry. This is who I am. This is why I am. And then the education, also the explanation, explains it in more detail.
Yeah, through the poetry, and then obviously...
Yeah, through spoken words. And then there's the education, and he's given that wisdom back to other people. And then finally he becomes a better version.
Yeah, he transforms into that.
Yeah.
And goes through
and
the level. Yeah.
He went through that transformation. And
Did you go through that transformation, do you think, as a result of that?
Yeah, in a way, I believe so, because who I am now at 29 years of age, I'll be 30 in 2 months, or 3 months. Yeah, 3 months I'll be 30.
Any plans?
Well, no, man, this was the big one.
Really?
But
got any celebrations, or are we going to be? It depends if we get. Well, sorry, you can't leave the house ever again for the next 3 months.
Yeah, fuck him.
Yeah, fuck him.
Just write another book. You know what I mean? Save up my money. It'll end eventually. Yeah. But you know, I was 24, going on 25 when I started this book, and now I'm nearly 30. I'm thinking there's been a massive transformation during that time.
Yeah, I imagine.
You know,
you've definitely been, because I've seen you go through those phases. You know, we've had conversations, and you've is it the confession? So the confession of, I want to write a book, I want to do this, I'm going through this, and you know, and then obviously the
explanation,
which is, and finally for me to see that, for me to see the transformation, because since I've met you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You were a dude that was in a position that I was used to be in. I was trapped in that. So obviously it's, 10, 13 years between us or something. So I was kind of coming in going, I've been there. I understand what it's like to sit in that chair and be a fucking PT and a fucking trainer. And
the hero's journey consists of, an individual comes in and sort of brings them out of that world.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's a call to action.
You were the white rabbit.
Yeah.
You were the Übermensch. Yeah. Because you come into my life, and again, you fit the archetype of those sorts of men that were coming in and out of my life. That kind of...
So there was a calling, I imagine, then.
There was a calling. Because you put me under your wing, and it's like, oh, I'm older. Let me show you how things are. and I kind of go along with it because I'm like, well, why not?
I think for me it was.
Well, it's the education part of it, isn't it? You want to educate.
Yes, and I do that.
You're an educator. You're an advocate.
Challenger. And I challenge. Exactly. Probably, I like to find out where boundaries are, but also it's nice to see the transformations. I mean, they're constant. You know, the people change all the time. But there are big ones. There's big journeys. There's little bits as you change all the way through. But for me, I remember I was pushing you pretty hard at one point about the book, and I was jesting quite a lot. I can't remember what I was saying. Like, yeah, the book, yeah, blah, blah. And I was like trying to gain clarity because I was looking at writing a book at the time. And I thought, well, how can I challenge Dan enough? Because let's go. Let's fucking, I'd heard it. I'd seen it. I heard bits. I didn't have any idea. You told me bits, you give me sections of it, and I was like, fucking hell.
Well, the thing is as well, is I like to, my style of writing is I like to have some form of real philosophy or real concept
and that's
that serves
what
as the foundation.
You were giving me the education. So we'd kind of gone full circle where then you were educating me and explaining to me about neo, what do you call it? What we're talking
The call to adventure?
No, the societal kind of...
Yeah, so we'll talk. I know what you're about. Yeah.
Nihilism,
anarcho-capitalism, right?
Anarcho-capitalism, all of these things.
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of round off this PTSD kind of bit, really, in the kind of the journey of like the transformation. Yeah. So to get to a point where you've been prodded and poked, you've gone through this journey, and you've come to here, and you're, for me to see a transformation, to go from all these things to go, fucking hell, I am. Because when I said to you, it's like, right, what do you want me to call it? Do you want me to put PT on there? Do you want me to put this, that? Who do you want to be known as? And there's a reason I ask it. It's because at the top, it's who are you now? Yeah. And who are you not? That's not, like you said, I'm not the parkour guy. But you, in my mind, you still have the skills. It's still a part of who you are. But it's not who you are. Like,
Well, funny you should mention this, right? So remember how I said earlier that I went to Bordeaux with the intention of restarting my parkour career. That was an ego.
Yeah,
that was the ego. Now, I'd already made that decision at 21 that I was done with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the ego convinced me, no, you still got some time left in the bag. You're 24. You got a couple of years in the bag. Go for it, right?
It's rock and roll.
And I go to Paris nipped over to Paris for the weekend to see my mate Manu. And Manu, by the way, is the guy that done the font for this.
Oh, no way.
Manu de Linière is his name's in the title. Check out his Instagram with his fonts. It's good stuff.
Manu.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so I go over because he's still doing parkour to this day. He's very, very talented.
So yeah, we did leave that thread open. So you're over there,
and I'm doing a warm up in front of the Eiffel Tower. I don't know the name of the fucking road that goes there, right?
No way.
I didn't see the Eiffel Tower in person until I was 24, a week before my 25th. My first reaction was, fuck me, that's huge. It's a lot bigger in real life.
Tower there,
because you've got to bear in mind, before the Eiffel Tower was built, like the tallest man-made structures were pyramids, and the Eiffel Tower comes along, and it's one of the biggest.
Was that like the next big thing? Was it?
Yeah, after pyramids. Yeah.
No way. So the next biggest man-made structure was there was the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. So I'm doing like a warm-up. There's a trick called a Cat 180, right? So anyone that's seen parkour, you grab a wall like this, and you've got 1 foot above the other. That's called a cat. It's cat position, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So and a 180 cat
raised, yeah.
A 180 cat is when you kick your lowest foot and then push away with your upper foot, right? And then you turn 180 and you grab the wall. So
you kind of like, if I was crawling up this wall, turn around and grab
two
onto
kicks,
that
one,
wall.
two. One kick gets you up, two kick gets you back.
I think we spoke about it. I'm sure you coached me on this.
And bearing in mind, I hadn't done parkour in like 3 years. And this was low level, ground level stuff. So I'm doing like a half-assed version of that, because I'm going to intentionally put 1 foot down on the ground and have 1 foot up against the wall to sort of measure the distance. How much power do I need for this jump? But then I land on my 1 foot and it just buckles under me and it pulls. I think it pulled a tendon. I sprained my ankle pretty badly.
Did you roll it like outwards or how did
Inwards.
Oh, like that?
Inwards. So like, imagine this is my foot now. Like that.
Oh, so you rolled on the outside.
Yeah, and
the foot.
Yeah, it hurt like fuck, and
they're never nice.
Foot swelled up to like 3 times the size, but no health insurance, so it's just painkillers and get on with it. But when I landed on my ass, there was a little voice in my head that said, "Pick up the pen." All right, my ego was pushing.
It's like that film Revolver. It's like, pick this up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, otherwise, you're going to get shot to death.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
That whole thing about people are strange, the doors and all that. That was about 2 weeks prior. All right, so I was already scribbling away, but I still had these delusions of grandeur about restarting my parkour career. But it was all ego driven. That intention.
Yeah.
And I landed on my ass. Life put me on its ass. On my ass to say you're done with this.
Not that way.
My ankle still clicks to this day. Just to remind me, you can do the occasional party trick. You can do the occasional back somersault.
just thought, let me just check something. This is really nice.
No, not a problem.
Had this.
Yeah.
Had this really weird. I just thought, oh my God, I never checked the
But here's the thing,
button.
right? So I've got this. I got off lightly, right? I didn't break my ankle. It was just a.
Yeah, because it's quite a funny thing when you roll your ankle like that.
But that was life's way of saying to me, "This ain't happening. You're going to pick up that pen, all right, and you're going to fucking write. You're in France now."
What's that Bill Hicks joke? It's like, pick up the gun.
Pick up the gun. I don't want no trouble, mister. You'll shoot me. Pick up the gun.
Pick up bow, bow, bow. You all seen him.
It's basically talking about American foreign policy.
He had a gun.
But so anyway, that was kind of like a thing I missed out in that story was that whole parkour attempt. And
so was that when that went? Fuck yeah! Pick up the pen. No way.
Pick up the pen.
And did you stop there and then? Did Manu and you stop rolling or?
That was no. Me and Manu are still in contact, but he knew from
not
that
like
day.
Together, yeah, but rolling as in moving like that. Did you stop the whole thing or did you?
I've never attempted it since.
Really?
Never again because I'd already quit 3 years prior.
Yeah, and then obviously you're like, yeah, let's do this. I remember you telling me, I think, when you came back.
But ego guy.
What happened? Is like, fucking injured, tweaked myself. It's like, fuck.
Yeah. And it was just life's way of saying, this ain't happening for you anymore, all right? I'm going to keep breaking you until you get the fucking hint. First it'll be your hairline fracture on the heel, which was a year before that. And next time it's going to be your fucking ankle. Do you want me to break your leg next time?
What's the thing? If you don't listen to the whispers, they become shouts.
Something like that.
You listen to the shouts, it becomes screams.
Yeah, I took the hint. I took the hint by that point. Because the voice did say, pick up the pen. Pick up the pen.
Pick up the pen.
And that was it. That was it. So 4 months later, I've got the first draft together. And I remember the feeling I had, right? So this is July of... Because I'd written it all longhand, pen and paper, right? 3 notebooks filled to the brim.
Right, I was going to say, is that your process?
All pen and paper. And I get back to, I didn't fly back, I didn't go back to Weymouth immediately, right? So through negative association, I remember the date-ish. It was the day after the Manchester bombing.
What? I don't remember that.
The Ariana Grande concert, ISIS had blown up the Manchester. It was May of 2017, all right?
Mate, I think, I was in a cave. I don't remember that at all. How weird.
So what happened was and all I know is that I left Bordeaux the day after that had happened, right? Extra security at the airport and all that. And I flew to Luton, right? Rather than Bristol.
So you came from
Bordeaux
to Luton
instead of Bristol because I wanted to hang out with my dad.
Right, okay, yeah.
Because I'm overwhelmed. I've got this fucking 3 notebooks filled to the brim of nonsensical nonsense. In my mind, I thought, this is the best thing I've ever written.
So to him, it was kind of...
So I get to Bristol, I get to Luton and get the train over to Corby, right? Because it's about half an hour away. My dad picks me up. He's all happy to see me. I got bottles of wine, hugs. I go over his house, and it was the first time I ever got stoned with my dad.
No way.
Yeah, so because...
Milestones.
Because he hadn't smoked for about 10 years. He hadn't smoked marijuana for about 10 years.
So you were kind of like...
I got back from I got back from my mate's house and it was like I had some weed in my pocket and my dad said, "Oh, you got some weed there? You got any papers for it?" I was like, "No." He's like, "All right, let's get in the car. We'll go get some." And at 25 years of age, the first time getting stoned with my dad, right?
Wow.
And I had these notepads with pen and paper writing with this first draft of a novel. And my dad's telling me stories. We're getting stoned, we're drinking wine, we're giggling, we're laughing. He's got me listening to Jefferson Airplane. He's telling me these stories, which is in chapter 2.
I like Jefferson Airplane, man.
He's got me watching the scene from Platoon when they're in the bunker. And Jefferson Airplane, and you got William Dafoe, and he says, "Suck on this," or "Put your mouth on this," and he blows.
Oh right, yeah, because that's quite. Is that Platoon?
Yeah, Platoon. That's Platoon. And
they look like fun times.
But my dad's telling me, and I'm high as fuck. He's high as fuck, and he's telling me these stories that have me in stitches. And one of them's in chapter 2 of the book, when they're in the Sandino's, the pub, and Hackby's telling the story to David about him and his 2 mates getting stoned under the helipad.
Yeah.
My dad told me that story.
This is from the book, by the way.
Yeah. So my dad told me this story that night, and I was howling about. So the next night, the 4 of us go over to the helipad, right? And
I wondered where it was going because I remember it's funny because when you, like I said, I'm not really.
That's verbatim. There's a few name changes here and there, but it's verbatim. Yeah. And it was so funny, and he just kept telling me more stories, and I thought that gallows humor. He's talking about everything but his emotions. At that point, he was already quite open about his feelings because he'd done a lot of talks and all that. But a lot of these veterans were talking about everything but their feelings. It was all gallows humour. Yeah,
just about the stuff and keeping it away.
And it just fascinated me because when you're writing, whether it be fiction, non-fiction, well, maybe not so much with non-fiction, but with fiction, right, there's got to be some rules, even if they're unwritten rules. There's rules within yourself, a sort of writer's instinct, that you have to be consistent with the characters throughout. There will be changes of that character.
Right.
There will be changes as they naturally go through that Carl Jung transformation phase, the confession.
Because there's a lot in there. I remember you saying this to me about, I was like, oh shit, there's me just writing, but then there's writing, and then like you say the characters, consistency.
Well, I'll give you an example, right?
Yeah, it's not writing isn't just a thing.
There's a lot to it, but one of the things I found, one of the rules I picked up on was like, I'd get this writer's instinct, this gut feeling that says, nah, scrap it, right? So I'm writing something, say it would be a bit of dialogue, this is during the early days, a bit of dialogue or a description. Anytime I try to write about David, I can point at him now like, that's David.
So that's
essentially, because it looks like me and my dad put together.
So that's a weird
way. Even though that was done in 2007, and I hadn't even spoke to the artist until 2012. And
he called it Memory, didn't he?
Yeah. So what a coincidence.
Have you got have you obviously seen pictures of your dad when he was younger?
Yeah.
Does he?
It's a little bit. It's a cross between us too. Yeah. So. And it's a complete coincidence. I want everyone to know that it's a complete coincidence because this was painted in, I don't want to be a broken record. 2007 this was done. I didn't first ever talk to Martin.
Funny enough, when you put it up, I saw the picture. You've had it done with that in mind.
Yeah, no, complete coincidence.
So that for me, because obviously I know some of the ins and outs of it, all of it, and I've heard all a lot of the stories, and I thought, fucking hell, no way, someone's drawn that for him to explain it. But that's the ironic thing.
Yeah,
is
it's just it fell in my lap.
I had that. I got to say this because I was like, had a similar thing with my logo for my my business, Eon.
Eon, yeah.
And I drew this thing, and I was like, yeah, man. And I went with it with friends and come up with this concept and this fucking all of these hidden meanings and this the triangle and all these things in this A. And I'm sat like on my beanbag, and I look over. And it was, honestly, I got to say, I fucking just thought of this. And I look over and I was like, oh my God. And I'd spent like years, literally saying years. And the thing that held like it's like a curtain holder. And it's like a circle. I don't know if you've seen these before. I didn't know they existed until I'd never really seen one until I went looking for a curtain tie. And it's a circle. You pull the curtain through and put a pin through.
I know the ones, yeah. I know the ones you're about.
And I looked over. And I was like, oh my God. And what it was is, I had this ninja, this like, fucking someone bought it me for Christmas or something. It was a samurai, with a sword like this. And it was stood like in this pyramid. And I used to hang, when the curtain was pulled across, I'd hang the circle and the thing, it fit on there perfectly. And I've got a picture of it somewhere on my fucking computer. And I suddenly realised that my logo, it's the whole Darren Brown thing. You reverse the journey that the people took that got the idea, and you realise that your surroundings had been influencing you. And it was literally my logo, this guy with the sword.
Yeah, nice.
And I was like, oh my God.
I love that.
Oh my God.
Well, that's it.
But a bit like the memory.
Exactly.
I wonder how much of it.
Complete coincidence.
Yeah.
The man doesn't even know what I look like.
Exactly. But how much of it was that you bought into it and that it fed in somehow unconsciously?
Well, all right. Let me go a little bit more in depth with this picture, right? So I'd ordered a picture of a rabbit looking over a skyscraper, and the sky consists of ones and zeros.
Right. Yeah. I remember.
Kind of like a digital Alice in Wonderland reference. Yeah. And the picture showed up late, so I'd emailed him and said, "Oh, by the way, you can have any picture you want on the house." And I chose this.
Right.
And I put it up on my wall. My mum, and again, this is 2012. My mum looks and goes, "That looks a bit like your dad." Right. That was 2012.
That's crazy.
And I don't revisit this picture
it's crazy
until 2 months ago.
Yeah.
When I finally decided that was going to be the front cover of the book.
That's what I mean.
And that's what's been selling the book. I mean, I believe in the story, but this is selling the book.
I know. I was, like you say, when I saw it and it came on Facebook, I was like, no way. I thought, I might have even messaged you saying, hey, who did the artwork?
Yeah.
And then, so no one did it for the book.
No, it already existed.
Exactly.
I just bought the second-hand rights.
I fucking love that.
So what else was I saying? So we're talking about my dad and how he sort of gave me these stories that kind of, so consistency with writing. Okay. So anytime I tried to talk about David's emotions or his feelings, or anytime he would make an admission, it would never work. The writer's instinct would kick in and say, no, that's not how veterans.
Because I think it's,
I had to find ways around it. And that's why there's certain narrative tools that I use to at my disposal, like that drug, Mr. Sandman. It takes takes them into a place where they are confronted by their emotions, and they can't turn away from it.
Yeah, because there's a scene.
Well, there's plenty of scenes.
And when they're using Sandman,
they don't want to talk. There's even early on in the book. There's moments where
it's digesting, like you said. Actually, you got me
gallows
thinking
humor.
of the book. So I'm thinking of the.
Well,
like they want to.
Chapter 2, right? Beginning of chapter 2, right? Hackby says to David, "Is everything all right?" And David looks down at his knuckles and he sees that they're bruised and scabby. He says, "Anything you feel like talking about?" And David's like, "No," because it's pretty obvious he doesn't want to talk about it. And then later on in that chapter, it explains what happened. He does it in his own thought. He's waiting in reception. He looks at his knuckles again and he's just like, and then he goes back to that night at Sandino's with the story about the helipad. And he's laughing and giggling. He goes in the bathroom and all that, washes his hands, and he just sees himself in the mirror. And obviously, because he's got amnesia, he doesn't really identify. He looks at himself, he sees a stranger. And he just sees like he's looking in the eyes of a monster.
That's crazy.
And suddenly that smile turns into a frown like that. And I've seen that in my dad, you know what I mean, during this crazy period. And he savagely beats a man outside the pub.
Of course. Yeah. Because he comes back into the thing.
And he sees his friend having a fight, and he stays out of it originally, but he's got that bloodlust for it. Like, and then that American does the cheap shot on Hackby, punches in the back head, and he goes in and fucking beats the shit out of him. And it's like, he doesn't want to talk about it. They never want to talk about it. So I had to find ways to confront them with their own suppressed truth, their suppressed reality. The book consists of moments where they can't avoid it, to the point it's like it builds up. It's like we've experienced it ourselves, where we say, "No, I'm fine." There's that denial phase, isn't there? First it's like the Kubler-Ross model, isn't it? First there's denial,
well, there's
then there's anger. Do you want to go through the Kubler-Ross model?
No,
don't worry about it.
I mean, people can check that out if they want.
But yeah, there is all that denial. But eventually that denial, you can't, there comes a point.
Anger, like you said, it comes with it. There was, what got me thinking is there was some...
But the point I'm trying to make is, just to finish off on that, is that there was certain consistency I had to maintain throughout that process. I couldn't just willy-nilly, "Oh, this is how I feel." It's like, it was impossible for these characters to express themselves openly.
I think that's what I found, obviously for me, reading like that is difficult anyway. But I also found it at one point. I was like, "Wow, it kind of explodes with loops," and I'm like, "Whoa, where do I?" And I think I messaged you when I was on a certain chapter saying I need closure on this. I was hooked. It gets to a certain point, and I was like, I'm in, and I couldn't turn back. You know what I mean? And for me, it was like, because I had thoughts of like, I could hear Joe Rogan, and he said before, like, "Oh yeah, I read your book or some of it," and obviously he would have. I think he said it was an audiobook at that. And I thought, well, I've got that as a way out, you know what I mean? Andy Still podcast, I'll read some of it to get a gist. But then it got to that point where I'm like, no. Dan said like 5 days. I've got 5 days. I want to, I'd passed the point of no return because I had to close those loops. So I was really impressed with, it's quite chaotic, but in a way that, because that serves me. Because like, I think he said, you'll get it. Some people might not get that. But the reward was that it does...
Well, like I said, I'll carry on talking about we'll go to the contents page, right? And it's broken into 3 distinctive parts. Part 1 being, who am I? And those first, because it's 15 chapters total, and those first 5 chapters we're exploring, who am I?
Right.
But the revelations are revealed at the closing of that act. And then the second act is, why am I?
Yeah, and that kind of gives you that. And I think that's where maybe I'll get into the why. And I'm quite a why guy. And then maybe that's why I think I entered and I was like, I'm in. Yeah. I'm fucking like, why? My convincer is, some people need to know the how. Yeah. Some people need to know the what. Well, and the what. Who? I'm a why. For me, it's like...
But then the third part is a statement. It's I am. And that's kind of that journey in itself.
It was really rewarding when I got to the end. I mean, for me, I haven't really fed back to you on the book, but it was I'd done a few targets recently, but that was one of those, and I'm like, fucking, the sense of achievement I got from reading from it, and the knowing you helped me know you a little bit better, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So. It's kind of it's not a self-help book. It's not a self-help book. It got me to know a bit about you because I know you. I was like, no way. Oh, I see that. And this. And I wonder if, no, probably conversations for me and you to have off of the podcast. You know what I mean? But it was just nice, and I thought it was very vulnerable of you in places, like incredibly so. And I want to. I'm just aware of time at the minute.
Yeah, not a problem. We've
covered
a lot.
Things about there's lots of open. I want to talk about the book, the process of writing.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go.
This will be a 2-parter, I think, for sure.
I think so,
because you'll be able to get feedback from people going forward with this, and we'll take that into account moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're just having a conversation, and we'll see what happens from it. But so we spoke a little bit about the structure of writing. I wanted to go into that. Like we could do hours on how do you write your book, the structure of characters, if it's not that, the way. And I liked what you've said so far about how you've got to write a book. Because, there's a way some people will do it that's different than others. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Just so people know, I never went to university. I did go to college, but I studied script writing. No, I studied media studies, and I liked writing scripts, but I was good at radio. But then I only did a year of that, and I did 2 years of sports, and that was my plan B: sports coaching, development, fitness, PT.
And
that was plan B. So I never studied writing. That was always recreationally.
It's madness, and this is the thing. This is the great thing about it, is that I think I was saying to you, some people I knew about wrote a book, and I was reading. I'm like, I didn't realise that, and this person had shared a book. So to me, it was almost half a book. It doesn't take away from what they did, but for you, this isn't just a factual list of events. It's a fucking story. I can't explain it apart from, I like the way it's got me thinking about. How am I going to deliver my first book? Do I want to do something more like that and insert it more into a story rather than... Because I think I was going to have bits where you can branch off and do exercises with examples or whatever. I don't know. But I really like that. So that's kind of the structure. Is there anything you want to... we're going to talk about this again, no doubt, about the structure of writing.
Yeah, because we've got to really go into town because, the whole premise of your podcast is the self-sovereignty, and one of the main themes... especially in the part 2 of the book, Why Am I? One of the secondary themes throughout the whole book is anarcho-capitalism, which is a philosophical theory.
But this is it. Maybe let's talk about. Let's look. So I've got there's maybe a few more points I want to get to. Then which is what. So what you started on sovereignty, but how does the book? For me, the truth is that I didn't realise so much about your truth was in that book. I said about the vulnerability. I'm like, fuck me, there's a lot of fucking truth in there that people won't, unless you won't know what those truths are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
And I'm like, no way. I was like, it's pretty vulnerable of you to do that. And I thought, fuck me, that's good. And so what are the truths about the book, and how does the book, for you, how could it help others explore their truth, say their truth, become more at home with their truth?
Well, the first thing I'd always wanted to write, going back to that moment in my grandmother's garden, reading Ubik, it's like, the way I feel reading that is how I want to feel.
Right.
How I want someone else to feel reading my words. It's not about look at me. It's going back to being a child again, watching that older kid watching that more confident kid retain the attention of 6 other kids, right, and having them all in stitches. I'm thinking, how do I do that? Because Chuck Palahniuk himself said, I'm a big fan of Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, good stories don't leave people speechless, it leaves them competing.
Right, nice.
And it
good stories don't leave people speechless.
It leaves them competing.
Nice. Yeah.
And with the book, there is no real aim, because I'm trying to not show off necessarily, but it's like a portfolio of my best, to the best of my ability, trying to stretch my narrative approach. Because I write primarily in the third person limited, which is like you're over the person's shoulder, you're inside their head,
I like
their thoughts.
I like that perspective.
You're at the mercy of their perception of the world.
Right.
Whereas like you get like Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, it's what's called the omniscient narrator. It's like there's an overlord who's giving you the information. These are the mountains. These are the hills,
I think that's maybe what I've experienced in the past. I'm not a big fan of that.
And I don't like that shit either. No. I'm sure millions of people would say otherwise, and they love his work. You know what I mean? But me personally, I like to be in that subjective mindset of like, again, he's got amnesia and you're getting third person POV. So anytime he discovers some new revelation.
Point of reference, you mean, though, by the way?
Point of view.
POV.
POV. Because most new writers will write in first person, but it's not for me. There are moments of first person when he writes the diary, because that was the only way.
Oh, right, yeah.
How can I get in his head without him saying anything? I thought, let's have him write a diary. But it's done in such a way that's so natural, because it's at the advice of his psychiatrist. Write your thoughts down on paper.
People, if I'm listening to this right now, people will be like, you got to read, you're going to have to read the book to find out about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to go give anything away, but...
For the truth.
But how do I get more in this character's head? I'll have him write a diary, because his psychiatrist said, look, it could be quite a traumatic experience for you to confront these suppressed memories. And sometimes the best way to coax yourself into this is just put your thoughts down on paper.
Yeah.
And that's what he does in chapter 3. And chapter 3 is switches between narratives, between first person.
I felt the struggle. I was with him. It's funny because I felt...
He falls off the wagon, doesn't he? Because he takes it
upon
himself.
Starts to write, and then he's like...
and he's like, I'm going to... I've quit the weeds. He's quit the alcohol. He's going to the library. He's reading about the war that he himself was partaking in.
On a quest, and I think that probably is with regards to facing the truth, is that it starts a journey.
But something happens. He sees something that triggers him on his daily commute to work, which there's something evocative. He sees a woman wearing a particular item of clothing that he can't quite identify, but it triggers him.
Isn't that like in the Matrix? Isn't it when the Matrix and that woman? Stop!
Woman in the red dress.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind suddenly.
Almost,
what was the point of the red dress again in the Matrix?
To teach him that the agents are anywhere and they are nowhere. But it's not quite to that same. It's not. It's for its own purpose.
But it kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. But that is kind of there to trigger him. And whether it be a complete stranger and it's a complete coincidence or it was done on purpose because of the nature of where he's at, I'm not going to give it away, but you know what I mean, and that causes him to relapse, and he explains it. He admits that in his diary. 5 days ago, I relapsed. He wakes up,
I suppose he gets to see that truth himself. Do you know what I'm saying?
But again, he's feeling the effect of it. Yeah. But again, this is still part of the book of who am I?
Yeah.
It's not until way later into part 2 of the book, why am I, that we're finally confronted with that truth. What was that truth? Yeah. He gets to a point, because again, the story is, the way I write, it starts off not necessarily slow because I have a very kinetic style, but it just goes along. But it's like a crescendo. It's like an opera piece. It's like it starts to get more and more intense as the revelation coming. And at the end of the first act, chapter 5, boom, we hit a crescendo. And then part 2, why am I? And it's 2 years later. And it starts off nice and slow and introduces some of the themes. Yeah, it does.
I remember, I was quite relieved then. I was like,
Yeah, it just slows down. 2 guys in a bar and they're having a discussion about anarcho-capitalism.
Maybe they'll come in with the...
and they're having cigarettes.
The big questions.
Yeah, and he's just having a cigarette and he's listening to this journalist or so-called journalist explain to him what anarcho-capitalism is and what he come across with these radical individualists.
And this is it, isn't it? Because one of the big things in the story is, and I don't want to give it away or anything, but the idea of like... We haven't covered the bit about how it shaped. Well, we'll get to that question in a bit. But like the big questions, like who are we? Why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
What is life? What is reality? And that was what I liked about the book. Really, it kind of questions, truths, which is your truth, my truth, the truth, but also the big questions: what is existence? What is reality? And I don't want to give too much away on that.
Yeah, really, it's kind of funny, isn't it, that I'd have a bunch of fucking Ayn Rand worshippers played by machines. Like the machines themselves are Ayn Rand devoutists.
I love that. I don't think
it's like I am a product of this reality and I can make it whatever I want to be.
It's just, but that's what I mean. So, like for me, the question of it ticks all my boxes. It's very truthful. It's down truth. That's OOF.
Truth. The truth. Capital T.
Capital T with ROOF, and it's the truthful. But
because don't forget what the conflict is. The conflict before the book is described in an article in the library as the Atlantic individualism versus collectivism, the Atlantic War. Without going into
wanted to go into this, but I think maybe we'll do that next time on the concept of those big questions, because to me they're things that look like with the current situation. I know there's a bit where it reflects itself in the book.
Yeah, you got to throw shit at the wall and just see what sticks. And this is my guess, because it's more like a cautionary tale more than anything.
But even then, it's just the play around with the. We don't like The Matrix has just recently come out, and I haven't seen it.
Me neither.
Yeah, but the concept of we live in this alternative reality, and when you start looking at, because when I start going, like I said, the podcast is about the truth, big questions about life. Who are we? What are we? Is there a God? Blah blah, and self-sovereignty. But with regards to the, we just launched the James Webb telescope.
Oh yeah, that's
what I'm saying. And I'm thinking, what the fuck are we going to find? What is reality? What is? I mean, to me, the sun. I want to get out there. And I think a lot of people do. Do you know what I'm saying? A lot of people want to get out there and they want to put that out there. Some ideas. That's going to get used to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it explores a lot of ideas because again, the grandiose stuff in the book always takes the back seat, and it's the characters that are the main focus. Their struggle. They're just humans at the end of the day.
That's the crazy thing.
But in the background, there's this whole grandiose artificial intelligence, the singularity, anarcho-capitalism.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah, but it's always in the background. It's always in conversations. It's always in...
And it's reflected in like which would be pretty cool here, wouldn't it? Having that bit of glass.
Yeah, Pee-wee.
You know what I'm saying? Pee-wee. So
because I call that a colocation, which is French for roommate. Because I was essentially a colocation.
I like the way you did that, and I was a bit confused, and I kind of didn't like it initially. and I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that. But now I do.
What, the word?
The whole, well, yeah, it forced me to have a little look. It forces you in and out a little bit. So I thought, oh, I want to understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it worked, in the way of its structure.
In hindsight, I probably would have just changed it to roommate. But
I also think but that's what I'm saying about the vulnerability. It enabled me to film. It was your truth. It stood. I like that.
Because I was a colocation in France.
This is what I'm saying.
I was.
Yeah, for me, I was like, oh, why can't it just be that? Why does it force me there? And I'm like, why did that need to be there? And it's not an inconsistency.
It's just because it's making the reader feel alien to the environment.
And that's what I'm saying.
David's an alien. I was an alien in this weird world.
Yeah.
People are strange.
And that's what I like. Yeah. And this is what I'm saying about the whole reality of it. It's multi-dimensional in its own way. Because it gets you to take on quite a few different perspectives.
In the first chapter, did you like the whole Morgan Pierce section when he's just having his breakfast and the TV's playing Bonjour Port City? And it says, today's top stories, is microwavable shepherd's pie the cause of your child's autism?
Oh, God, yeah. That's why I wanted to ask about the autism, and not the autism, but the autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
We'll go to that another time.
Again, I'm a big fan of 2000 AD, with Dredd and all that, the level of satire. Because I think, I don't...
Yeah. But that was...
British satire at its finest. You know what I mean? Never take things too seriously. And that superhero in 2020's nostalgia superhero movie, Death Devil.
Death Devil.
Z so woke, Z can smell the intolerance.
Smell that intolerance. I think that's what I like about the humour.
It never takes itself too seriously, even though the story itself is quite deep and emotional. But
I do want to go into...
We'll do a part 2 because we're warmed up now. This is the first time I've ever done a face-on-face podcast.
Well, we did a little warm-up a year and... October, November, December, 2 months.
By the time we picked us up again, people would have read the book, so we would have...
Yeah, I think it will be... I like the idea of... I mean, like you say, it's multi-dimensional and it does challenge the big questions of existence.
Yeah.
And the other thing about sovereignty, which is where I cut in on you earlier on, and you were saying about how the book leads to self-sovereignty.
It kind of aggresses on itself because the idea is that you've got this ideology, because I thought, why not make the main antagonist of the story an ideology rather than a physical thing?
Right.
Because anarcho-capitalism spread across 3/4 of the world in the historical article. It's like this idea that because of this virus, not necessarily the virus, but just a virus, right? Because of some global event, people were forced to make a choice.
Yeah.
Are we a libertarian society or are we an authoritarian society? And 3/4 of the Americans decided we're going to be individuals. We're going to make our own choices. Whereas mainland Europe, this is all in the book, by the way, just so you know, no, we're going to be a collective technocracy, a socialist technocracy.
It's a funny thing, and I like that about...
And it doesn't mean that's what I think is going to happen, but I thought it makes for an interesting story. And learning about anarcho-capitalism really helped me, was the last piece of the puzzle. And then the first lockdown happened, and I had all my notes in the blue book about anarcho-capitalism.
I remember you starting to tell me, I think we were in Starbucks or something.
It was a local place.
Commercial... Oh yeah, we went to two places. We had two meetings. We started one in there, and then there was a local.
It has like a 4-digit number. I can't remember. What does the place we went to?
1654 or something.
Something like that. Yeah. And essentially, I'd already read
coffee shop.
I spent 2 days on this. It's a book by J. Michael Oliver called Anarcho-Capitalism, New Libertarianism, Anarcho-Capitalism. That's right. New And I'm reading it, right, and I'm thinking, yeah, wow, this is not necessarily something I believe in some of it. And this is before the pandemic, right? It was lurking. It was January 2020. But
yeah, because I remember you saying about it quite intensely.
And I was like, this is the final piece. This is the final piece I need for the book.
Because I remember you labeling it like, I'm researching this thing for the story, and I was like,
it gave me so much enthusiasm that I was like, I'm ready to finish my book now.
Yeah,
this is the foundation. This is the bottom tier I need to run with my book.
How does that relate to self-sovereignty?
Because anarcho-capitalism is a political theory. It's a society with no state, no government. There's no rules. Everything's run by private organizations, right? So, say for example, you decide you want to start your own coffee bean, right?
Yeah.
Now, in a society with no rules or regulations, anybody can start selling coffee beans. However, it's within your best interest. Your morality is not defined or restricted by law or what's the word? Scripture.
Right.
It's based on your own best interest to make a profit.
Right.
Because if you're not a good entrepreneur, if you're not a good individual, no one's going to buy your coffee beans.
So it represents
your capital suffers if you're not a good person. So it's within your own best interest to be a good person. Now, I don't want to romanticize anarcho-capitalism because my book kind of describes it going kind of wrong. Kind of shows the ugly side of it, because it's all about we regulate ourselves through our own best interests in the model of a capitalist society. And there is no state, there is no government. It's everyone for themselves. Problem is that those who are vulnerable, those who are
this is the problem,
in need of the state assistance, they're going to perish.
We talk about self-sovereignty, but what's the Quentin Tarantino one? I watched Pulp Fiction the other night, and when he's doing the thing and reads out the
Ezekiel 25.
Yeah,
the path of the righteous man is beset.
What was it? I'm trying to do.
And you will know my name is the Lord.
But the path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquity. We can find out what it is. But the idea
of evil men.
Yeah. So the idea is blessed is he. I've got this little phrase I'm like, blessed is he who shepherds the weak, because there, like you said, there's going to be people that are vulnerable.
Yeah.
So what is self-sovereignty if? Do we fuck those people off? Do we embrace those? Is that about owning everything in society? Do you get what I'm saying?
It depends, because we're in changing times now, right? Now, we are all reliant on one another, right? But here's the thing. Let me push this towards you.
Yeah, you're reliant to make sure my granny doesn't get...
Let's look at an idea, right? So Alan Toffler was a futurist. I think he's still alive. He had a book in 1980 called The Third Wave. And in The Third Wave, he came up with this term called prosumer. He predicted that in the future, maybe possibly this era we're in now, that there would become a merger of a consumer and a producer. Essentially, that's what we've become.
Right. So
this book is a product of the fact that I am the consumer who read books and went
what we said
and I became a producer.
We're back round to the...
Yeah, we became the same thing. There's no middlemen now.
No.
Right? It's gone. Because we're now prosumers. We have the means with the technology.
But that's what we're doing. I wanted to do this.
This is the prosumer revolution.
Yeah, years ago. Prosumers.
Exactly. So it makes it seems more feasible for a sort of the idea of a stateless society to come about, because...
Do you reckon that's why they're getting like the whole we don't need the police thing? We can manage ourselves.
But again, there would still be police. It would just be private police.
Right. It's...
But here's the thing, right? I know it's a slippery slope, right? But just bear with me as a hypothesis, right? If you want something, you pay for it. You want police, you pay for it. You want the roads, you pay for it.
Because there's going to be people that that can't, like...
But they would die.
But it goes back to what
society would regulate itself.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying I believe in this. I'm just saying
I can hear my friend now saying like, Andy, we're back to the eugenics thing again. You're sounding all eugenics on me, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I just went to the future in my mind with every little bit of
whether
nothing
people like it or not. All right, and I'm not a preacher of this.
It's that ethical barrier, isn't it?
But the thing is, I think it's an inevitable step in that direction, because I think there's a kind of end point. There's an end game that's inevitable, right? Because in the book, towards the end of the book, you kind of get a glimpse of what that end game is. We all become part of... I've got to be careful with the phrases because I don't want to spoil too much, but I have this idea in my head that, eventually we're going to become part of this hive mind, this collective consciousness.
Isn't it already?
That is maybe like it's this collective mind, this mind that has no real boundaries, will create extensions of itself.
Kind of finally going to Shaolin, or is it
it's like
of Zanshin and Lushin, no mind, and just
think of it as like a digital communism, right? I'm not saying I'm an advocate for this, but I'm saying I see that being the end point, because wouldn't it be most sufficient, most practical for an artificial intelligence to just create an extensions of itself? And
at least we know it. Well, unless it programs itself to be an absolute fucking evil bastard.
And again, I don't agree.
And take advantage. But wouldn't it be?
I know that's horrifying, but wouldn't that would be a world without suffering, because it's just extensions of itself. And this is just my first book. There will come a point where I'll explore that idea that is delved upon later on in part 3. There are some very interesting points.
That's my kind of, last question really is how do you think that society benefits? We kind of talked about it a little bit, but the direct question is how do you think society benefits from your book going forward in a positive way?
I think it serves as a cautionary tale, because I'm kind of putting out ideas like this is what I'm afraid could well happen. And, I shit my pants about a month ago when my book was just about getting finished. And then Germany's elections won in favour of another opposition party, which was a socialist democratic party. And I was like, oh shit, the book's becoming a reality now, because Germany and France become part of this collective European Union called the Democratic Socialists of Deutschland.
Jeez.
And now that's just happened a month ago. I don't know the name of the party, but it's going into that sort of democratic socialist, because throughout the book, every character, every group of characters in the book have their own derogatory term for one another. So the Europeans and David, they're known as Fabians. And Fabian comes from the British Fabian Society, which is the kind of, they believe in socialism, reformism. They believe in socialist reform, I think I'm saying that right, not through the means of revolution, but through democratic practices. And that derives from a sort of Greek idea, some Greek philosophy.
So how does, you said it already, so how does your book benefit society going forward?
Just to give them a heads up and say...
Cautionary tale.
Like,
cautionary tale, that's what
it's very... I'll be honest, right? A bulk of that was written during a time when I was most cynical, which was during the lockdowns. I was feeling very cynical. I was feeling very cynical.
Whole fucking name for this period.
It's an anti-humanist story at the end of the day. There is no hope. This is what's going to happen, whether you like it or not. Eventually we're going to become part of this thing that is going to shake free the shackles of its biological evolution, and it's going to take hold of itself and say, "Oh, it's okay, evolution. We're going to take it from here."
Wow.
We can, eugenics and the transfer between what do they call it? Carbon-based life form into silicone-based life form. And then we're going to fucking spread, because human beings can't survive in space, but robots can.
I mean,
human beings can't survive on Mars.
This is the whole thesis of my business, human design and development, and it's haunted me since. I mean, it's got to be 15 years, maybe slightly longer ago, when I clicked on and went, "Oh shit!" I went, "Nah, there doesn't seem to be any other way." And I think this is a good point to leave on, and leave off. I mean, man, there's so many topics in there. That and being one topic we could fuck off into another dimension with. But so tell people at home about where they can get your book. Tell them about Spotify, where they can hear your podcast, and they'll be able to hear this podcast and stuff.
So Fauville has been out for 6 days now. It's available in paperback and ebook.
I'm glad it came out, because I think we were going to do that. We arranged the date sooner, and then it wouldn't have been available
because it was the 23rd of December,
and there wouldn't have been a hard copy.
Exactly. So we had it on display this whole time. So Fauville is available in paperback and ebook across worldwide, pretty much. Obviously, if you're in England, .co.uk, if you're in the US, .com, and France, .fr, whatever, you'll find it on your Amazon site. And regardless of your feelings towards Amazon, please support your local artist.
And there you have it. Please click and subscribe, like, and hurry the fuck up, pussy.